The morning sun cast long shadows across Arlington National Cemetery. Captain James Iron Jack Harrison stood motionless before a white marble headstone, his weathered face a map of battles fought and comrades lost. At 58, his steel-gray hair matched the gravitas of his presence. 35 years in tanks had taught him to endure far worse than the November chill cutting across the cemetery grounds. The headstone read, Captain Jack Sullivan, United States Army, Operation Desert Storm, beloved father and soldier. Been a while, Jack, Harrison whispered, placing a small challenge coin atop the headstone, the emblem of the 3rd Armored Division, gleaming dully in the early light. 20 years since Sullivan had died in his arms, the desert sand turning crimson beneath them. Harrison still heard his final words. Promise me you'll look after Michael. Some promises were heavier than others. His phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed Department of Defense. Harrison, he answered, voice gruff. Captain Harrison, General Maxwell's office. The General requests your presence at the Pentagon tomorrow morning, 0800 hours. Harrison's eyes narrowed. Robert Maxwell was now chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but 30 years ago, he'd been Harrison's battalion commander in Desert Storm. May I ask what this concerns? The General said to tell you it's about Warhammer, sir. Harrison's grip tightened. Warhammer, his old Abrams tank. The name summoned images of burning oil fields, the thunder of the 120mm cannon, and the iron brotherhood of his crew. I'll be there. He turned back to Sullivan's grave. Looks like they're calling me back in, Jack. One last mission. The wind scattered autumn leaves across the cemetery. Whatever it is, I'll keep my promise to you. The next morning, Harrison sat across from General Maxwell in the Pentagon, coffee mug warming his hand. Jack, I'll get right to it, Maxwell said. We need you back. With respect, General, I've been out for 3 years. There are younger men better suited for whatever you have in mind. Maxwell rose and moved to the window. That's just it, Jack. We don't want younger men. We want you, specifically. He turned, fixing Harrison with a commanding look. The Army is changing. Drones, AI, remote systems. The brass wants to phase out manned tanks entirely within 5 years. Harrison felt a surge of disbelief. That's insane. No machine can replace a tank commander's judgment in the field. I agree, which is why I've convinced the Secretary to authorize one final demonstration. A legacy crew against the new automated system. Harrison leaned forward. And you want me to command this legacy crew? I want you to command Warhammer, or rather Warhammer 2. We've retrofitted an Abrams with the original Warhammer's hull number and call sign. What exactly would we be demonstrating? Maxwell smiled tightly. That humans still have a place in modern warfare. That experience and intuition can't be replicated by algorithms. And if we fail, then the Army accelerates its automation program. The last tank commander training class graduates this year, and there won't be another. Harrison stared into his coffee. Part of him wanted to walk away. But deeper still was the knowledge that some battles needed to be fought by men who understood the true cost of war. When and where? Fort Hood, Texas, 2 weeks from today. You'll have 3 weeks to prepare. I choose my own crew, Harrison countered. Maxwell nodded. Within reason, you'll need to include at least one recent academy graduate. Harrison thought of Jack Sullivan's son. I want Lieutenant Michael Sullivan. Maxwell's eyebrows rose. Jack's boy? He's currently stationed at Fort Hood, tank platoon leader. Then it's meant to be. Who are we up against? Maxwell pressed a button, and a holographic display sprang to life. It showed a sleek, angular tank unlike anything Harrison had seen before. Project Prometheus, fully autonomous main battle tank with networked battlefield awareness and predictive engagement algorithms. No crew, no risk to human operators. Harrison studied the image. Looks impressive on a drawing board, but tanks fight in mud and blood, not simulations. That's exactly what we need you to prove. The demonstration will involve 3 scenarios: urban combat, desert terrain, and mixed topography. You'll be competing directly against Prometheus. And my opponent? Who's running Prometheus? Maxwell's expression tightened slightly. Dr. Amanda Wells heads the program. Harrison felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. Amanda Wells. The name conjured a storm of memories, most painful. Wells didn't know she was still with the department. She's been leading our autonomous weapons division for 8 years now, Maxwell said carefully. She specifically requested this demonstration. Of course she had. 20 years ago, Amanda had walked away from their relationship to pursue her research. The future of warfare is in algorithms, not armor, she'd said. Anything else I should know? Harrison asked, his mind already assembling strategies. Just one thing, Maxwell said, sliding a folder across the desk. This demonstration has attracted significant attention. Congress, defense contractors, even foreign military observers will be present. The stakes go beyond just American armored divisions. No pressure, then. One more thing, Jack, Maxwell added as Harrison stood to leave. Amanda doesn't know you're commanding Warhammer 2. Harrison's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. Good, I like surprises. Machines don't. 3 days later, Harrison drove through Fort Hood's main gate, the autumn sun beating down on the dusty landscape. Colonel Frank Reynolds, an old comrade from Afghanistan, met him at headquarters with a broad grin. Jack Harrison, you old war horse, Reynolds boomed, engulfing Harrison's hand in both of his. When they told me you were coming, I thought they were pulling my leg. Frank, Harrison nodded, genuinely pleased. Congratulations on the Eagles. Politics and paperwork, Reynolds waved dismissively. Your crew is assembled and waiting at the motor pool. I selected them myself, except for Sullivan. How is he? Harrison asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Reynolds considered his answer carefully. Smart, capable, West Point, top of his class, but what? He's his father's son in appearance only. No fire in the belly, plays everything by the book. Harrison absorbed this silently. Jack Sullivan had been a warrior poet, a man who understood both the science and soul of armored warfare. And the others? Sergeant First Class Leroy Washington. You remember him? Harrison's eyebrows shot up. Leroy's still in. He must be pushing retirement. Requested to stay for this final mission when he heard you might be involved. Best loader in the division still. And my driver? Private First Class Jessica Rodriguez. New school, tech genius. Can hack a satellite with a paperclip, but has only driven tanks and simulators until 6 months ago. They drove to the motor pool where the distinctive silhouette of an M1A2 Abrams tank waited. This was no ordinary Abrams. Harrison saw the custom desert tan paint job, the red stripes on the turret, and the name stenciled on the main gun. Warhammer 2. 3 figures stood nearby. Harrison recognized Leroy Washington immediately, the tall African-American sergeant's frame still powerful despite his age. Beside him stood a young Hispanic woman, her posture perfect military, and a young man who could only be Michael Sullivan, the image of his father at that age. Captain Harrison, Washington called out, a wide smile breaking across his face. They really dragged your old ass back from retirement. Watch it, Sergeant, Harrison growled, but there was no heat in it. Washington ignored his extended hand in favor of a bear hug. Damn good to see you, sir, Washington said, stepping back. Harrison turned to the others. Lieutenant Sullivan, Private Rodriguez, I'm Captain Harrison. Sullivan snapped to attention. Sir, Lieutenant Michael Sullivan, reporting for duty, sir. Harrison studied the young man's face, seeing Jack in the eyes, the joma, the set of his shoulders, but there was a stiffness to him his father had never possessed. At ease, Lieutenant. I served with your father in Desert Storm. He was the finest tank commander I ever knew. Sullivan's expression didn't change. Thank you, sir. I'm aware of your history with my father. The coolness was unmistakable. Harrison turned to Rodriguez. Private First Class Jessica Rodriguez, sir, driver. Ever driven an Abrams in actual terrain, Private? 6 months of field training, sir, plus over 1,000 hours in advanced simulators. Harrison nodded. Simulators can't teach you how it feels when a shell impacts 10 feet away, but it's a start. He approached the tank with reverence, fingers tracing the cool metal of the hull. They had done an impressive job recreating the original Warhammer, right down to the kill markers painted on the turret ring. When was the last maintenance check? He asked, circling the vehicle. Completed this morning, sir, Washington replied. She's in prime condition. Harrison nodded. Good, we'll need every advantage against Prometheus. Sir, Sullivan interjected, his tone formal. I've reviewed the Prometheus specifications. Its targeting system uses quantum computing to calculate ballistic solutions. Its reaction time is measured in microseconds. With respect, how are we supposed to compete with that? Harrison turned to face his crew, his expression hardening. The same way tank crews have always overcome superior technology, Lieutenant, with training, teamwork, and tactics the enemy can't predict. He looked at each of them in turn. Machines fight with logic. We fight with instinct, experience, and the knowledge that real lives depend on our decisions. He placed his hand on the tank's hull. From this moment forward, we are a crew, not individuals. Everything we do together. We eat together, train together, think together. By the time we face Prometheus, we'll be able to read each other's thoughts. Washington grinned, just like old times. Better than old times, Harrison corrected. Because this time, we're fighting for the future of every tank crew that comes after us. Sullivan remained skeptical. Sir, with all due respect, the technological gap may be too significant to overcome with conventional tactics. Harrison fixed him with a stare that had made hardened sergeants flinch. Lieutenant, there's nothing conventional about how we're going to fight. Tomorrow, 500 hours, we begin training. I suggest you all get some rest. As the crew dispersed, Harrison remained with the tank, his hand still resting on its armored flank. In the distance, he could see the distinctive silhouette of a hangar that hadn't been there during his last visit. That would be where they kept Prometheus. Reynolds approached, handing him a key card. Officer quarters are ready for you. Harrison nodded, his mind already strategizing. She's here, you know, Reynolds said quietly. Dr. Wells arrived yesterday with a team of engineers and programmers. Harrison's jaw tightened. I figured. Word is they're running Prometheus through final calibrations. Some kind of special programming for the demonstration. Trying to predict what I'll do, Harrison murmured. Will she? Reynolds asked. Harrison finally turned away from the tank, a grim smile forming. The Amanda I knew couldn't. The Amanda who left to chase algorithms and equations? We'll see. Chapter 2. The Final Formation. Dawn broke over Fort Hood with military precision. Harrison stood at his quarters window, coffee in hand, watching the base come to life. His phone chirped with a message from Washington. Crew ready at motor pool, awaiting orders. The crew stood at attention beside Warhammer 2 as Harrison approached. Washington looked alert despite the early hour, his experience evident in his relaxed but ready posture. Rodriguez struggled to stifle a yawn but straightened when she saw Harrison. Sullivan looked as if he hadn't slept, dark circles shadowing his eyes, but his uniform was impeccable. At ease, Harrison said. Before we begin training, I need to understand what we're up against. Lieutenant Sullivan, share what you know about Prometheus. Sullivan stepped forward, assuming a briefing stance. Sir, Project Prometheus represents the culmination of 20 years of autonomous weapons research. The platform utilizes a modified Abrams chassis with significantly reduced weight due to the absence of crew requirements. Power plant is a next-generation hydrogen fuel cell, giving it extended operational range. Weapon systems, Harrison prompted. Primary armament is the standard 120mm smoothbore cannon, but with an autoloader system. Secondary armaments include coaxial 7.62mm machine gun and remote weapon station mounting a 50 caliber. The key advantage lies in its targeting system, which integrates data from multiple sensors processed through a quantum computing core. Harrison nodded. And its weaknesses? Sullivan hesitated. Official documentation doesn't acknowledge significant weaknesses. Everything has weaknesses, Lieutenant. Even the most advanced machine. Rodriguez cleared her throat. Sir, permission to speak? Go ahead. I worked briefly with the Autonomous Systems Division before transferring to Armor. Not directly on Prometheus, but similar projects. She glanced around. These systems are powerful, but they operate on prediction algorithms based on historical data. They struggle with truly novel situations. Harrison's interest sharpened. Explain. AI learns from patterns, sir. If you do something completely unexpected, something with no precedent in its training data, it needs time to adapt. Not long, maybe seconds. But in combat, seconds or lifetimes, Harrison finished. Good observation. Why did you transfer out of autonomous systems? Something flickered across her face. I believed humans should remain in the decision loop for lethal force. That position wasn't popular in the division. Harrison turned to Washington. Thoughts on our mechanical opponent? The veteran sergeant shrugged. Machines break, sir. Always have, always will. Question is, can we break this one before it breaks us? That's precisely the question, Harrison agreed. Today, we learn to be one organism. Sullivan, you're my gunner. Washington loader. Rodriguez driver. I'm your tank commander. 4 individuals, 1 purpose, 1 machine. For the next 3 hours, Harrison drilled them relentlessly. Loading procedures, target acquisition, emergency protocols, communication sequences. Sullivan's technical knowledge was impressive, his movements precise but mechanical. Washington brought veterans' efficiency to every task. Rodriguez proved surprisingly adept, her technological aptitude translating well to the Abrams complex systems. By mid-morning, they were granted access to the training grounds, a sprawling complex of varied terrain features. Harrison ordered their first live fire exercise. 5 targets, ranging from 800 to 2,400 meters, Harrison instructed. On my command, engage in order of distance, closest to farthest. Sullivan nodded. Ready, sir? Fire. The first round erupted from Warhammer 2's main gun with a thunderous roar, the recoil rocking the 60-ton vehicle. Downrange, the target erupted in flames as the round found its mark. Target 1 destroyed, Sullivan reported, already acquiring the next target. Washington loaded the next round with practiced efficiency. Up! The sequence continued, Sullivan destroying each target with clinical precision. When the final target had been engaged, Harrison studied the results through his binoculars. 5 for 5, center mass hits. Good shooting, Lieutenant. Sullivan acknowledged the compliment with a nod, but Harrison could see he took no particular satisfaction in the achievement. It was simply what was expected. Now for something less structured, Harrison said. Rodriguez, take us into the urban training complex. I want to see how we operate in confined spaces. The mock urban environment consisted of concrete structures arranged to simulate a small town, complete with narrow streets, blind corners, and potential ambush points. It was here that tanks were most vulnerable. In urban environments, communication is everything, Harrison explained as Rodriguez maneuvered them through the tight spaces. Sullivan, you're my eyes on the right. Washington, left side. Rodriguez, focus on the path ahead, but be ready to reverse instantly on command. As they rounded a corner, Harrison spotted a target silhouette in an upper window. Target, second floor, 2 o'clock. Sullivan traversed the gun instantly, but before he could engage, Harrison called, Hold fire! Civilian! Sullivan froze, finger hovering over the trigger. How did you identify it as civilian, sir? He asked. Blue armband, Harrison replied. Training identifier for non-combatants. Always confirm your target before engaging, especially in populated areas. After an hour of urban drills, Harrison noticed a small group of observers on a nearby hilltop. Even at this distance, he recognized Amanda Wells's slender figure, her blonde hair now streaked with silver. Beside her stood several individuals with tablets and sensing equipment, undoubtedly monitoring Warhammer 2's performance. Harrison gathered his crew in the tank's shade. Initial assessment, we're functioning at about 60% efficiency, acceptable for day 1, but nowhere near where we need to be. Sir, Sullivan began, I've been wondering about the strategic approach. Given Prometheus's technical advantages, should we be focusing on unconventional tactics? Define unconventional, Lieutenant. Sullivan hesitated. Tactics that might not be in Prometheus's predictive models. Perhaps maneuvers that would be considered outdated or inefficient by modern standards, but might confuse an AI expecting optimal responses. Harrison suppressed a smile. Despite his by-the-book demeanor, Sullivan was thinking creatively. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Prometheus will expect us to fight according to current doctrine. We need to show it something it hasn't seen before. As they remounted, Harrison noticed Sullivan lingering. Something on your mind, Lieutenant? Sullivan hesitated. Sir, I need to understand your command style better. Your expectations. You knew my father, but I never really did. Everyone tells me how alike we are, but you don't feel that connection, Harrison finished. And you're wondering if I expect you to be him. Sullivan nodded. Harrison considered his response carefully. Your father was a natural warrior. He had instincts you can't teach. But he also made mistakes, took risks he shouldn't have. He paused. I don't expect you to be him. I expect you to be the best version of yourself. That might look different from Jack Sullivan, and that's okay. Something in Sullivan's posture eased slightly. Thank you, sir. One more thing, Lieutenant, Harrison added. Your father would be proud of the officer you've become. Different path, same dedication. The afternoon passed in a blur of drills and exercises. By sundown, they returned to the motor pool, where Amanda Wells waited beside a sleek, unmarked vehicle. Secure the tank and get some rest, Harrison ordered his crew. Euro 500 tomorrow, same place. As the crew dispersed, Harrison approached Wells, measuring each step. She looked different, of course. The passionate young engineer he'd known had been replaced by a distinguished scientific director. But when she smiled, he caught a glimpse of the woman he'd once loved. Hello, Jack, she said, her voice still carrying that slight Midwestern accent. It's been a long time. Amanda, he acknowledged with a nod. I'd say you look well, but I think we're past pleasantries. She laughed, the sound genuine despite the tension between them. Still direct as ever. Some things don't change. Some things shouldn't, he countered, like keeping humans in command of lethal weapon systems. Her smile faded. The future of warfare doesn't include men and women coming home in body bags, Jack. That's what Prometheus represents. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're saving lives? Harrison shook his head. War isn't just algorithms and impact assessments. It's about judgment, morality, the human cost of every decision. Which is precisely why humans should be removed from the equation, she argued. Humans are emotional, biased, fallible. Yes, they are. And sometimes those mistakes lead to tragedy. But sometimes human judgment prevents greater tragedies. Can your machine tell the difference between a civilian holding a cell phone and a combatant with a detonator? Can it weigh the value of one life against many? Can it feel the weight of responsibility for the lives it takes? Wells sighed. This is exactly why we could never make it work, Jack. You see the world in black and white, good and evil, human versus machine. And you see it in code and algorithms. Tell me, does Prometheus know about us? Is our history part of its predictive model for how I'll behave during the demonstration? Her eyes widened slightly. We've provided the AI with comprehensive data on all participants, including psychological profiles and relevant personal history. Harrison smiled grimly. Then you've already made my point. You've had to humanize your machine, feeding it understanding of human relationships and motivations. Because deep down, you know that's what matters in war. Not firepower or processing speed, but understanding the human element. She studied him for a long moment. You haven't changed, have you? Still the same stubborn idealist. And you're still trying to create order from chaos. Some things aren't meant to be controlled, Amanda. They're meant to be experienced with all the messiness and uncertainty that entails. She glanced toward the hangar housing Prometheus. I guess we'll see which approach prevails in 3 weeks. I guess we will. As she turned to leave, Harrison called after her. Amanda, why did you request me specifically for this demonstration? She paused, looking back. Because if anyone can beat Prometheus, it's you, Jack. And if you can't, she left the implication hanging. That night, Harrison gathered his crew at the officers' club, a tradition he'd maintained throughout his command career. Breaking bread together, away from training, was how real bonds formed between tank crews. First round's on me, he announced. Consider it a reward for surviving day one. Washington grinned. If that was just day one, I might be too old for this after all. You're too old when you can't load in under 7 seconds, Sergeant. Last I checked, you're still under 6. Sullivan nursed a beer, his expression thoughtful. Permission to speak freely, sir? Harrison nodded. This isn't the tank, Lieutenant. We're off duty. Speak your mind. I saw you talking with Dr. Wells. You know her? A loaded question. Harrison considered deflecting but decided on honesty. We have history, personal and professional. It was a long time ago. And now she's leading the program that could make everything you've worked for obsolete. Ironic, isn't it? Harrison acknowledged. But it's not personal. Amanda believes she's saving lives, taking soldiers out of harm's way. Isn't that a worthy goal, sir? Rodriguez asked quietly. Harrison turned to her. It is. But at what cost? When we remove human judgment from warfare, we risk losing our humanity in the process. War should be terrible. It should weigh on our souls. That burden is what prevents us from waging it carelessly. He looked around the table. Do you know why tank crews are so close? Closer than almost any other military unit? Sullivan and Rodriguez shook their heads. Washington smiled knowingly. Because inside that steel box, your lives are literally in each other's hands. Sullivan, if you don't spot that RPG team in time, we all die. Rodriguez, if you can't get us out of that kill zone fast enough, we all die. Washington, if that round isn't loaded when we need it, we all die. And if I make the wrong call, give the wrong order, we all die. Harrison leaned forward. That shared vulnerability, that complete interdependence, creates a bond that can't be programmed or simulated. It's human, and it's worth preserving. Sullivan considered this. But if Prometheus can accomplish the same missions without risking human lives, isn't that progress? It's efficiency, Harrison corrected, not progress. Progress would be finding ways to avoid war altogether. This is just changing who or what fights our wars for us. And when war becomes remote, impersonal, fought by machines against machines, what's to stop us from waging more of it, not less? Washington raised his glass. To Warhammer 2, may she remind everyone why humans belong in the fight. They all drank to that, even Sullivan, though Harrison could see he was still wrestling with the implications of their mission. Later that night, a knock sounded at Harrison's door. Sullivan entered, still in uniform despite the late hour. Sir, I've received information about Prometheus that wasn't included in the official briefing. A former Academy classmate is on Dr. Wells's team. Harrison's interest sharpened. Go on. Prometheus isn't just being evaluated for our military. There are foreign observers involved. If the demonstration proves successful, the technology may be licensed to allied nations. That raises the stakes considerably. Sullivan hesitated. There's more, sir. Dr. Wells has been personally overseeing modifications to Prometheus's programming specifically for this demonstration. They're calling it the Harrison Protocol. Harrison felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. She's programming it to counter my specific tactics and tendencies. Yes, sir, based on your combat records, after action reports, even personal evaluations from superiors and subordinates. Harrison absorbed this information, then surprisingly smiled. She's worried. Sullivan blinked. Sir, if Amanda is going to these lengths, personalizing Prometheus to counter me specifically, it means she's concerned about the outcome. She's not as confident as she appears. Or she's being thorough, Sullivan suggested. Perhaps, either way, it changes our approach. If Prometheus is being programmed to counter my known tactics, we'll need to develop new ones. Sullivan nodded. I took the liberty of reviewing some historical tank engagements that might provide inspiration. Unconventional actions that succeeded despite conventional wisdom. He produced a tablet and handed it to Harrison. Harrison scanned the list, noting many were obscure actions from conflicts rarely studied in modern military academies. Impressive research, Lieutenant. Some of these I've never encountered. Thank you, sir. I've always been interested in armored warfare history, even before West Point. A connection to his father, Harrison realized. A way for Sullivan to know the man he'd barely had time to meet. Your father would approve. He was something of a historian himself. Used to say that those who don't study past battles are doomed to bleed in future ones. Sullivan's expression softened. He wrote me letters when he was deployed. I still have them. In one, he described a tank battle in the desert, said it was like dancing with thunder. That sounds like Jack, Harrison smiled. He could make even the most terrible aspects of war sound somehow noble. Was he? Sullivan asked quietly. Noble, I mean. Harrison considered the question carefully. Your father was a complicated man, Lieutenant. Brave beyond measure, brilliant as a tactician, loyal to his crew to the end. But noble? I think he'd laugh at the word. He was a soldier doing his duty as he understood it. Sometimes that meant making hard choices with no good options. Sullivan nodded, absorbing this. Thank you, sir. I should let you get some rest. As he turned to leave, Harrison called after him. Sullivan, you did good work today. Keep it up. Chapter 3, Between Two Generations. The next week passed in a blur of intensive training. Harrison drove them relentlessly, pushing beyond standard protocols, creating scenarios designed to force adaptation and innovation. Sullivan's technical knowledge combined with Washington's veteran experience and Rodriguez's technological intuition to form a crew that was beginning to function as a single organism. On the seventh day, Harrison declared a rest day. For himself, however, there would be no rest. He had a personal mission to fulfill. The Texas Veterans Memorial Wall stood on the outskirts of Killeen, just beyond Fort Hood's boundaries. Unlike the stark black granite of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, this monument was crafted from local limestone, warm and golden in the morning sun. Names of fallen service members covered its surface, arranged chronologically by conflict. Harrison walked slowly along the Afghanistan section, searching for a specific name. He found it near the center. Sullivan, Jack A. CPT, U.S. Army, 2003. Nearby, an elderly caretaker tended to fresh flowers. Noticing Harrison's attention to Sullivan's name, he approached quietly. You knew him? The caretaker asked. Harrison nodded. He was my best friend, died under my command. The caretaker, wearing a Vietnam veteran cap, nodded in understanding. His boy comes here sometimes. Looks just like him. Lieutenant Sullivan visits? Harrison asked, surprised. Once a year, on the anniversary. Sits right there on that bench for hours, sometimes reading letters. The caretaker gestured to a simple wooden bench facing the section where Jack's name was inscribed. Harrison thanked the caretaker and moved to the bench, sitting where Michael Sullivan had sat year after year, maintaining a connection to the father he'd barely known. Behind the by-the-book exterior was a son still seeking his father's approval. After a respectful silence, Harrison stood and placed his hand on Sullivan's name. I'm keeping my promise, Jack. In more ways than one. As he turned to leave, he noticed Lieutenant Sullivan watching him from the memorial entrance. Their eyes met across the distance, a moment of silent acknowledgement passing between them. Harrison walked toward him, neither man speaking until they stood face to face. I come here when I need perspective, Sullivan said finally, to remind myself why I chose this path. Harrison nodded. Your father would be honored. Would he? Sullivan asked, genuine uncertainty in his voice. Sometimes I wonder if I became the kind of officer he would respect. Everything I know about him suggests he was instinctive, bold, willing to bend rules. I'm not those things. Your father valued competence above all else, Harrison replied, and courage, which takes many forms. The courage to follow your own path, even when it differs from his, would earn his respect. Sullivan seemed to consider this. I used to imagine conversations with him, what he'd think of my choices, whether he'd approve of me joining armor instead of infantry, or attending West Point instead of enlisting like he did. And what did imaginary Jack say? A small smile touched Sullivan's lips. Mostly that I was overthinking everything. That a Sullivan belongs in a tank because we're too stubborn to walk and too smart to fly. Harrison laughed. That sounds exactly like him. He gestured toward the parking lot. I was heading to the old tank commander's bar in Killeen. Place called Iron Thunder. Your father and I used to go there. Care to join me? Sullivan hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that, sir. Iron Thunder hadn't changed much in 20 years. The same neon sign flickered above the entrance, a stylized tank silhouette with lightning bolts from its main gun. Inside, the walls were covered with unit patches, photographs, and memorabilia spanning decades of armored warfare. Captain Harrison? A voice called from behind the bar. Is that you? Harrison squinted, then broke into a genuine smile. Mickey O'Malley, you're still running this place? The bartender, a burly man in his 60s with a white mustache, came around to grip Harrison's hand. Till they carry me out, feet first. Damn good to see you, Captain. Retired now, Mickey. Just plain Jack, O'Malley snorted. No such thing as a plain tank commander. He turned to Sullivan. And who's this? Lieutenant Michael Sullivan, Harrison introduced, Jack Sullivan's son. O'Malley's eyes widened. Jack's boy? Well, I'll be damned. He studied Sullivan's face. You got his eyes, Lieutenant. Same look to him. First round's on the house. He led them to a table with a brass plaque reading, Reserved for Iron Knights. Your dad's unit, Harrison explained to Sullivan. We called ourselves the Iron Knights. Not official, just something between us. O'Malley joined them. So what brings you boys to Iron Thunder? Harrison exchanged glances with Sullivan. We're preparing for a special demonstration at Fort Hood, testing a new approach to armored warfare. O'Malley's eyes narrowed. That robot tank thing? Been hearing rumors about it for months. Prometheus, Sullivan confirmed. Fully autonomous main battle tank. No crew, no human risk. No soul, O'Malley added. So they've got you testing it? Testing against it, Harrison corrected. One last chance to prove that human crews still have value. O'Malley whistled low. High stakes. But they picked the right man. If anyone can outfight a machine, it's Jack Harrison. As the afternoon wore on, the bar began to fill with veterans, many recognizing Harrison. Word spread quickly about the upcoming demonstration, and soon their table was surrounded by former tank crew members offering advice and support. An aging veteran with a 1st Armored Division cap leaned in. Machines follow rules, that's their weakness. You gotta break the rules, do the unexpected. That's the plan, Harrison assured him, though easier said than done against an AI that can process combat scenarios faster than human reflexes. Speed ain't everything, another veteran countered. I served in Iraq 2007. Our gunner was the slowest in the company on drills, but in actual combat, he saw things nobody else noticed. Instinct, feel. A machine don't have that. Sullivan, who had been mostly listening, finally spoke up. What about precision, though? The autonomous system can calculate ballistic solutions instantly, adjust for variables human gunners might miss. Math don't win battles, son, the first veteran replied. Heart does. Courage does. The willingness to take a risk when the situation demands it. Harrison watched Sullivan absorbing these perspectives, seeing the internal conflict play out on his face. The lieutenant was caught between his respect for technological advancement and the undeniable human element these veterans represented. The door opened to admit Washington, who scanned the room and broke into a grin upon spotting Harrison and Sullivan. Thought I might find you here, sir, he said. Rodriguez and I were concerned when neither of you answered your phones. Harrison checked his device, finding it on silent with several missed calls. Sorry, Sergeant. Got caught up in reconnecting with the past. Washington nodded, accepting a beer. No problem, sir, but there's been a development at the base. Rodriguez was monitoring Prometheus's testing schedule and noticed something unusual. Harrison's attention sharpened. What kind of unusual? They're running night exercises, testing Prometheus's thermal imaging and low-light targeting capabilities. Rodriguez thinks they're specifically practicing for potential night operations during the demonstration. Sullivan frowned. The parameters we were given didn't mention night operations. Maybe they changed, Harrison suggested. Or maybe they're just being thorough in their preparation. Either way, Washington said, Rodriguez thought you'd want to know. She's back at the motor pool, running some diagnostics on our own night vision systems. When they returned to base, they found Rodriguez beneath Warhammer 2, makeshift lighting illuminating her work on the tank's underside. Rodriguez, Harrison called, Washington told us about your discovery. What have you found? She emerged, wiping grease from her hands. Sir, I've been running diagnostics on our thermal imaging system. It's good, but not as advanced as what Prometheus is using. They've got next-generation sensors with significantly better resolution and range. Can we compensate somehow? Sullivan asked. Rodriguez hesitated. Well, I think I can boost our system's performance with some modifications. Harrison raised an eyebrow. What kind of modifications? Software adjustments mainly, changing how the system processes and displays thermal data. I could also recalibrate the sensors to optimize for the specific conditions we're likely to encounter here at Fort Hood. Harrison considered this. Would these modifications compromise system reliability? No, sir, they might actually improve it, but they would deviate from standard operating parameters. Harrison smiled slightly. Do it. This isn't about following the manual, it's about winning. Sullivan looked concerned. Sir, if we start modifying systems, where do we draw the line? The demonstration is supposed to be a fair comparison between human crews and AI. Fair? Harrison repeated. Prometheus was designed from the ground up for this specific purpose, with access to resources and technology we can't match. We're fighting with what we have, adapting as humans have always done. Sullivan didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. I understand, sir. As Rodriguez returned to her work, Harrison gathered Washington and Sullivan. Night operations change our approach. We need to revise our training schedule to include low light and thermal exercises. The training grounds are booked solid for the next 3 days, Sullivan pointed out. We'd need special authorization to access them after hours. Then we'll get it, Harrison said decisively. Washington, you still have connections with the Range Control Office? The veteran sergeant grinned. Master Sergeant Davis owes me for covering his poker debts last deployment. I'll see what I can arrange. As the crew dispersed for the night, Harrison remained with the tank in the quiet motor pool. He placed his hand on its hull, feeling the solid metal beneath his palm, cool in the night air. 20 years ago, your namesake carried us through hell, he murmured. Now we need you to help us shape the future. Don't let us down. In the distance, lights burned in Prometheus's hangar. Amanda and her team would be working through the night, programming it to counter tactics Harrison had used years ago. But they couldn't program it to understand why those tactics had worked. The human elements that had made them successful. The intuitive leaps, the split-second judgments based on experience and instinct. The moral considerations that shape decisions. That, Harrison reflected, might be their greatest advantage. Not what they could do better than Prometheus, but what Prometheus could never truly do at all. Fight with heart, with soul, with the weight of human responsibility guiding every decision. Tomorrow they would begin the final phase of their preparation. In 2 weeks they would face Prometheus in a contest that would help determine the future of warfare. And Harrison was increasingly confident that whatever the outcome, they would demonstrate something machines could never replace. The indomitable human spirit that had defined warriors since the dawn of conflict. Chapter 4. The Final Oath. The next morning, Harrison gathered his crew at the firing range before dawn. The horizon was just beginning to lighten, casting everything in shades of gray. Perfect conditions for their first night operations training. The human eye is naturally disadvantaged in low-light conditions, Harrison began. Prometheus doesn't have that limitation. Its thermal imaging systems work equally well day or night. We need to turn that seeming advantage against it. How, sir? Rodriguez asked. Their sensors are objectively better than ours. Because Prometheus will trust its sensors implicitly, Harrison explained. We won't. We'll use multiple information sources, including the most important one. He tapped his temple. The human brain can detect patterns and anomalies that machines miss, especially when something doesn't quite add up. For the next hour, they practiced target identification and engagement in progressively darkening conditions, until they were operating by starlight alone. Sullivan's accuracy remained impressive, though his timing slowed as visibility decreased. Not bad, Harrison assessed as they completed the exercise. But we need to be faster without sacrificing accuracy. Rodriguez, how are those sensor modifications coming? Nearly complete, sir. I should have the enhanced thermal imaging online by this afternoon. Good. Washington, I notice your loading time increases slightly in low light. Any way to compensate? The sergeant nodded. Been thinking about that, sir. If we rearrange the ammo storage slightly, I can work more by feel than sight. Might shave off a second or two. Do it, Harrison authorized. Every second counts. As they continued training through the morning, Sullivan gradually adapted his targeting approach, relying less on visual confirmation and more on the integrated fire control system. By noon, his engagement time had improved significantly. You're getting it, Lieutenant, Harrison commented. Sometimes you have to trust the machine to do its job while you focus on the bigger picture. Sullivan nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. It feels counterintuitive. I was trained to verify everything visually. That's the paradox of fighting Prometheus, Harrison replied. We need to be more human than ever, while also leveraging our technology more effectively than we normally would. They broke for lunch, eating quickly from ration packs in the tank's shadow. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly, the temperature inside Warhammer 2 climbing despite the environmental systems. Rodriguez, while you're enhancing the thermal imaging, any way to improve the cooling system? Harrison asked. This heat could affect our performance in the demonstration. She considered the question. I might be able to optimize the coolant flow, sir. The current system prioritizes the electronics over crew comfort. We could adjust that balance a bit. Make it so a machine doesn't sweat, doesn't get heat fatigue. We need to minimize those human disadvantages. Sullivan looked up from his meal. Sir, something's been bothering me about this whole setup. If the demonstration is truly about comparing human versus autonomous tank operation, why include all these performance metrics? Time to target, precision of engagement, damage sustained. Those favor the machine automatically. Harrison nodded approvingly. Excellent question, Lieutenant. Why indeed? Because they're not really testing if Prometheus can replace human crews, Washington interjected, his expression thoughtful. They already know it can, by their metrics. They're testing if there's any reason at all to keep humans in the loop. Exactly, Harrison confirmed. This isn't about performance statistics. It's about demonstrating that there are aspects of warfare that can't be measured in milliseconds or millimeters. Decision-making that involves ethical judgment, adaptability to unpredictable situations, creative problem-solving that goes beyond algorithms. So how do we prove that, Rodriguez asked? If the scoring system is designed to favor Prometheus's advantages, Harrison smiled grimly. We force situations where the right answer isn't the optimal one, where the correct military decision involves factors no sensor can detect. He stood, gathering in their attention fully. Listen carefully. From this moment forward, we're not just preparing to compete against Prometheus. We're preparing to expose its fundamental limitations as a weapons system, not by outperforming it, but by demonstrating what it cannot do, what it cannot understand, what it cannot become. A new sense of purpose seemed to settle over the crew. They weren't just fighting for their own pride or even for the tradition of human tank crews. They were fighting for something more fundamental, the principle that warfare, with all its terrible necessity, must remain a human endeavor, subject to human judgment and human accountability. As they returned to training, Harrison saw something change in Sullivan. The lieutenant's movements became more fluid, less rigidly by the book. He began anticipating Harrison's commands, developing the crew intuition that distinguished great tank teams from merely competent ones. By late afternoon, they had progressed to integrated drills combining movement, targeting, and communication under various conditions. Harrison pushed them harder than standard training protocols would allow, creating intentionally chaotic scenarios that forced them to adapt instantly. Ambush left, multiple hostiles, engine damage, he called suddenly during a movement exercise. Sullivan traversed the turret immediately, acquiring the simulated threat sector. Washington readied ammunition without waiting for the specific order. Rodriguez executed a textbook damaged engine maneuver, positioning the tank to maximize armor protection while maintaining firing solutions. 7.3 seconds, Harrison announced, checking his stopwatch. 2 seconds faster than this morning. Good progress. As sunset approached, they returned to the motor pool. Harrison noticed a small crowd had gathered to watch their arrival, including several officers he didn't recognize. The word about their mission had spread. Looks like we're developing an audience, Washington commented. Good, Harrison replied. The more witnesses to what we're doing, the better. As they secured Warhammer 2 for the night, Colonel Reynolds approached, accompanied by a civilian in an expensive suit. Jack, Reynolds greeted him. This is Mr. Richard Teller from the Defense Oversight Committee. He's here as one of the observers for the demonstration. Harrison shook the man's hand, noting his firm grip and assessing gaze. Mr. Teller, a bit early for the demonstration, isn't it? Teller smiled thinly. I like to get a feel for both sides before the main event, Captain. I've spent the morning observing Prometheus's capabilities. Most impressive. I'm sure it is, Harrison acknowledged. Technology usually makes a good first impression, and often a lasting one, Teller countered. The metrics we're seeing from Prometheus are remarkable. Response times, accuracy, tactical assessment, all significantly exceed human capabilities. Harrison nodded. Numbers don't lie, Mr. Teller, but they don't tell the whole truth either. Meaning? Meaning there are aspects of combat that can't be quantified. Judgment calls where the right answer isn't the mathematically optimal one. Ethical decisions where the variables include factors no sensor can detect. Teller studied him thoughtfully. Derwells mentioned you might say something like that. She also said Prometheus's ethical decision frameworks are more consistent than human judgment, less prone to error or bias. Consistency isn't always a virtue in combat, Mr. Teller. Sometimes the right decision yesterday is the wrong one today, based on factors no programmer could anticipate. Reynolds interceded smoothly. Perhaps this debate is best settled during the actual demonstration, gentlemen. Teller nodded. Indeed, I look forward to seeing your crew in action, Captain Harrison. Though I must admit, the smart money isn't on the humans in this contest. After Teller departed, Reynolds turned to Harrison. Sorry about that, Jack. Committee members showing up early wasn't part of the plan. It's fine, Frank. Better to know where they stand now. Harrison glanced toward the Prometheus hangar. How many more like him are coming for the demonstration? At least a dozen high-level observers, congressional representatives, foreign military attachés, defense contractors. As I said, high stakes. Harrison nodded grimly. Understood. Any word on the final demonstration parameters? Nothing official yet, but rumors suggest they're adding complexity. Multiple engagement scenarios, unexpected elements. Supposedly to make it a fairer test of adaptability. Or to ensure we can't prepare too specifically, Harrison mused. Either way, we'll be ready. That evening, Harrison called his crew together in the maintenance bay, away from potential observers or listening devices. The cavernous space, usually bustling with activity, was quiet at this hour, just the occasional echo of distant machinery breaking the silence. We've made good progress, he began, but we need to accelerate our preparation. 2 weeks isn't much time to become the crew that will prove humans still belong in tanks. Sir, Sullivan spoke up, I've been analyzing our performance data. We're improving steadily, but at the current rate, we won't match Prometheus's capabilities by demonstration day. We don't need to match them, Lieutenant, Harrison corrected. We need to exceed them in the ways that matter most. Ways that aren't measured by stopwatches and targeting computers. He unfolded a map of the Fort Hood training areas on the hood of a nearby Jeep. I've secured special access to Training Area 14 for the next 3 nights. It's a mixed terrain zone with urban features, open ground, and forested sections, perfect for what we need. Which is what exactly, sir? Rodriguez asked. Unconventional tactics development, Harrison replied. Sullivan's historical research gave me some ideas. Old-school approaches that modern training has abandoned, but might confuse an AI opponent. Washington grinned. Going retro on the robot? Something like that. Plus, I have information suggesting the demonstration will include at least one night scenario. We need to master fighting in darkness, using every advantage we can create. He looked at each crew member in turn. I won't lie to you. The next 2 weeks will be the most demanding training you've ever experienced. We'll be running drills other instructors would consider excessive, even dangerous. If anyone wants out, now's the time to say so. The crew exchanged glances. Washington spoke first. I'm in, sir. Been in tanks too long to let some computer take over now. Rodriguez nodded firmly. Same here, sir. Human decision-making needs to stay in the loop for lethal systems. That's worth fighting for. All eyes turned to Sullivan. The lieutenant stood straighter. My father believed in the soul of armored warfare, sir. The human element that makes it more than just ballistics and armor thickness. I may not be him, but I believe that too. I'm in. Harrison felt a surge of pride in his crew. Despite their different backgrounds, different generations, they were uniting around a shared conviction. that some aspects of warfare must remain in human hands, with all the responsibility and moral weight that entailed. Then it's settled, he said. From this moment, we are more than a training crew. We are the last defenders of human judgment in armored warfare. Everything we do from now until demonstration day serves that purpose. As the crew dispersed to prepare for the night's intensive training, Harrison remained behind, studying the map. The training area they'd be using had features similar to the likely demonstration grounds. If they could master fighting there, adapting to whatever the actual demonstration threw at them would be easier. A footstep behind him made him turn. Amanda Wells stood at the entrance to the maintenance bay, silhouetted against the outside lights. "Working late, Jack?" she asked, walking toward him. "Your dedication hasn't changed, I see." "Neither has your timing," he replied. "Still know exactly when to make an entrance." She smiled, glancing at the map he'd been studying. "Training Area 14. Interesting choice. Challenging terrain. Just thorough preparation. I'm sure Prometheus is doing the same." In a manner of speaking, she leaned against the Jeep. "Prometheus doesn't train in the conventional sense. It runs simulations, thousands of them, learning from each iteration, optimizing its responses." "Sounds efficient." "It is, but I didn't come here to compare methodologies." She hesitated. "I came to ensure you understand what's really at stake in this demonstration." Harrison folded the map slowly. "Enlighten me." "This isn't just about tanks, Jack. It's about the future of warfare itself. The Defense Department has autonomous programs in development for every combat domain. Prometheus is just the most visible, the proof of concept. If it succeeds, the floodgates open. And if it fails, years of setbacks for programs that could save countless lives. Is that what you want? More soldiers dying in wars when technology could fight for them?" Harrison studied her, seeing the genuine conviction in her eyes. "You really believe that's what this is about, don't you? Saving lives?" "Of course it is," she replied. "What else would drive me to dedicate 20 years to this work?" "The same thing that drives most visionaries," Harrison said quietly. "The belief that you're building a better world. But Amanda, have you considered that a world where warfare becomes easier, more remote, less costly in human terms, might be a world where we wage more wars, not fewer?" She frowned. "That's a policy question, Jack. I develop technology. How it's employed is for others to decide." "Is it? When the technology itself changes the calculus of conflict, shapes the decisions of those in power? We both know better than that." Amanda straightened. "I didn't come here to debate philosophy. I came to make sure you understand the significance of what's happening. And to tell you something else." She paused. "The demonstration parameters have been finalized. 3 scenarios as expected, but with a twist. Each will include an unanticipated element, something neither you nor Prometheus has prepared for." Harrison's interest sharpened. "What kind of element? If I told you, it wouldn't be unanticipated, would it?" She smiled faintly. "But I wanted you to know. Fair warning." "Why tell me this at all?" She looked away for a moment. "Because despite everything, I want this to be a true test. If Prometheus wins, I want it to be because autonomous systems are genuinely superior, not because we stack the deck." Harrison nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Amanda, more than you know." As she turned to leave, she added, "One more thing, Jack. Whatever you might think of me now, remember that I believe in what I'm doing, just as you believe in what you're doing." "The difference," Harrison replied, "is that I'm fighting to preserve human judgment in warfare. You're fighting to replace it." "No," she corrected. "I'm fighting to enhance it, to remove humans from physical danger while maintaining their oversight of the process. Prometheus doesn't make the ultimate decision to engage. Humans do." "For now," Harrison said. "But we both know where this road leads. Each success, each demonstration of capability, moves the human one step further from the decision point, until eventually, any shame, the machine acts autonomously because waiting for human authorization is deemed inefficient." Amanda didn't deny it. "Perhaps that's inevitable. Perhaps it's even necessary in a world where conflict happens at machine speed." She met his gaze directly. "Or perhaps you're right, and there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. That's what this demonstration will help determine." After she left, Harrison remained in the maintenance bay, considering their conversation. Amanda truly believed in her mission, just as he believed in his. Two people with a shared past but divergent visions of the future, each fighting for what they saw as right. The difference, Harrison reflected as he finally headed toward his quarters, was that his vision kept humans at the center of the most consequential decisions in warfare, bearing the moral weight of killing, feeling the responsibility that such power demanded. Amanda's vision, whatever her intentions, moved humanity one step further from that responsibility, made warfare 1 degree more abstract, more distant from its terrible reality. And that, he believed with every fiber of his being, was a step humanity could not afford to take. As he walked through the quiet base, stars brilliant in the Texas sky above, Harrison felt the weight of the coming demonstration more profoundly than ever. This wasn't just about proving human tank crews could still compete with autonomous systems. It was about defending the principle that when it came to decisions of life and death, of war and peace, human judgment, with all its flaws and limitations, remained not just relevant but essential. Tomorrow, the real preparation would begin. Night operations in challenging terrain, unconventional tactics development, pushing themselves in Warhammer 2 to limits the engineers who designed it had never anticipated. They would need every advantage, every innovation, every ounce of the human spirit that machines like Prometheus could simulate but never truly possess. The lights of the Prometheus hangar glowed in the distance, a beacon of technological promise. Harrison turned away from it, toward the motor pool where Warhammer 2 waited in darkness, a steel sentinel representing a tradition of warfare as old as humanity itself. Not just machines fighting machines, but humans making the hardest choices imaginable, bearing the burden of those choices, finding meaning in the chaos of conflict. That tradition deserved its defenders, and Harrison was determined to be the last tank commander standing, not just for his own sake, or even for the sake of tank crews yet to come, but for the principle that war, however it evolved, must remain a human endeavor, subject to human judgment, human conscience, and human accountability. With that resolve hardening within him, he continued toward his quarters, ready for whatever the dawn would bring. The Texas sun had barely crested the horizon when Harrison led his crew across the desert training grounds of Fort Hood. Dawn painted the landscape in hues of amber and gold, the distant silhouettes of mock buildings and training obstacles emerging from the darkness like ghosts. This early hour belonged to them alone, their special access to Training Area 14 secured through Washington's connections and Reynolds' quiet approval. Visibility conditions are similar to what we faced in Iraq, Harrison explained as they prepared Warhammer 2 for the day's exercises. Low-angle sunlight, dust in the air, long shadows creating false signatures. Perfect for what we need to practice. Sullivan studied the terrain through his commander's sight, methodically scanning potential engagement zones. Thermal signatures will be unreliable during these transition periods. Dawn and dusk create temperature differentials that can confuse targeting systems. Exactly, Harrison nodded, pleased by Sullivan's observation, and what might confuse our systems will definitely impact Prometheus. Despite its advanced sensors, it still obeys the laws of physics. Rodriguez finished her pre-operation checks of the driver's station, her movements becoming more confident with each passing day. Sir, I've completed the environmental control modifications. Coolant redistribution is optimized for crew comfort without compromising electronics cooling. Good work, Private. Harrison turned to address the entire crew. Today we focus on observation and detection, seeing without being seen, understanding what Prometheus can and cannot detect under various conditions. Washington secured the loader's hatch, his experienced hands moving with practiced efficiency. Just like hunting, sir, know your prey senses better than it does. Precisely, Sergeant. Harrison pointed toward a ridgeline approximately 2 kilometers distant. Our first objective is to reach that position without being detected by the observation drones. They're equipped with the same sensor suite as Prometheus, running the same detection algorithms. Sullivan frowned. The drones are already active? I thought this was a closed training session. It is, Harrison confirmed, but I specifically requested they maintain their normal surveillance patterns. Consider it our first real test against Prometheus's eyes. What Harrison didn't mention was that he'd learned from Reynolds that Amanda's team was indeed using the drones to gather data on Warhammer 2's movements, studying their tactics for Prometheus's benefit. By knowingly operating under surveillance, they could control what the autonomous system learned about them, potentially feeding it misleading information. Rodriguez, take us in through the dry creek bed, Harrison ordered as they prepared to move out. Minimum speed, minimum dust signature. Sullivan, continuous scan for observation platforms. Washington, be ready for rapid deployment if we need to engage unexpectedly. The massive tank moved with surprising stealth, Rodriguez demonstrating a natural talent for terrain navigation that belied her limited field experience. She kept the vehicle in depressions, used vegetation for cover, and maintained a speed that minimized the dust plume that might give away their position. Harrison monitored their progress from the commander's position, his experienced eyes constantly sweeping the sky for the telltale glint of surveillance drones. 20 minutes into their approach, he spotted one, a small speck circling at high altitude. "Drone at 2 o'clock high," he announced calmly. "Hold position." Rodriguez immediately brought Warhammer 2 to a halt in the shadow of a small bluff, the tank's desert tan camouflage blending with the surrounding terrain. "Thermal signatures?" Harrison asked. Sullivan checked the readouts. "Engine heat is building, sir. Will be visible on infrared within minutes if we remain stationary." "Options?" The crew fell silent for a moment, each considering the tactical problem. It was Rodriguez who spoke first. "Sir, if we back into that shallow cave formation to the east, the rock overhead would mask our heat signature from aerial observation." Harrison smiled approvingly. "Good thinking, Private. Execute." With careful precision, Rodriguez reversed the tank into the natural formation, a shallow overhang that provided just enough clearance for the Abrams turret while shielding them from above. "Drone is making a search pattern," Sullivan reported, tracking the unmanned aircraft through his sights. "I believe it lost us when we stopped moving." "Or it's pretending it lost us," Harrison countered. "Never assume technical limitations in your opponent. Assume intelligence and adaptation." They remained in position for 15 minutes, watching as the drone completed its search pattern and eventually moved on to another sector. Only then did Harrison order them to continue toward the ridgeline objective. As they approached their target, Harrison had them practice a technique rarely used in modern armored warfare: hold-down positioning. By placing the tank so that only the turret was exposed above terrain features, they minimized their visible profile while maintaining full firing capability. In the Gulf War, Harrison explained as Sullivan practiced acquiring targets from their concealed position, "We would create fighting positions overnight, just deep enough to protect the hull while giving the gun full traversal. Iraqi tanks in the open didn't stand a chance against us." Sullivan nodded, understanding dawning. "And Prometheus would be programmed for modern armored warfare doctrine, which rarely employs such tactics anymore because of improved anti-tank weapons." "Exactly," Harrison confirmed. "We're reaching back to methods that worked before modern thermal imaging and satellite reconnaissance made them less effective. Against human opponents, these tactics might be outdated. Against an AI trained on contemporary doctrine, it creates uncertainty," Rodriguez finished, "forces the system to adapt to situations outside its training parameters." For the next several hours, they practiced various detection avoidance techniques, from using terrain masking to reduce radar signature to timing movements to coincide with the environmental conditions that might confuse Prometheus's sensors. By midday, the heat had become oppressive, the temperature inside Warhammer 2 climbing despite Rodriguez's modifications to the environmental systems. Harrison called a brief halt, allowing the crew to rehydrate and cool down while he assessed their progress. "We're improving," he noted, studying the data from their morning exercises. "Detection avoidance time has increased by 30% since we started. But it's not enough. We need to be invisible until we choose to be seen." "Sir," Sullivan ventured, wiping sweat from his forehead, "I've been thinking about Prometheus's integration with other battlefield systems. If it has access to satellite imagery or drone feeds, our concealment techniques might be less effective than we hope." Harrison nodded, impressed again by Sullivan's tactical insight. "Valid concern, Lieutenant. That's why our next phase involves electronic countermeasures." He turned to Rodriguez. "Private, I understand you have some expertise in this area?" She straightened, suddenly looking slightly uncomfortable. "Yes, sir. During my time in autonomous systems, I worked briefly on signal vulnerability assessment." "In other words," Washington grinned, "you know how to jam these fancy systems." Rodriguez nodded reluctantly. "Theoretically, sir, but implementing such measures might be considered beyond the parameters of fair competition." Harrison considered this objection seriously. "Our mission isn't just to compete, Private. It's to demonstrate the full range of human adaptability in combat conditions. In a real battlefield, electronic countermeasures would be part of our toolkit. We'd be remiss not to include them in our demonstration of human capability." She still seemed hesitant. "What exactly did you have in mind, sir?" "Nothing that would permanently affect Prometheus," Harrison assured her. "Just enough to create momentary sensor confusion, to demonstrate that reliance on technology creates vulnerabilities that human judgment can exploit. Rodriguez considered this, then slowly nodded. I could modify our communication system to generate specific electromagnetic pulses that might temporarily degrade certain sensor types. Nothing damaging, just disruptive. How long would it take to implement? Harrison asked. A day, maybe two. I'd need parts from supply and some uninterrupted time with the communications array. You'll have it, Harrison promised. Washington can requisition whatever you need through his channels. Official requests might raise unwanted attention. Washington nodded with a sly smile. Been running unofficial supply lines for 20 years, sir. The Army runs on paperwork, but tank crews run on knowing the right supply sergeant. As they prepared to resume training, Harrison noticed Sullivan staring thoughtfully at the distant observation post where drone operators monitored the training grounds. Something on your mind, Lieutenant? Sullivan turned, his expression troubled. Sir, I'm still wrestling with the ethics of what we're doing. If Prometheus truly could save lives by removing humans from harm's way, do we have the right to oppose its implementation based on philosophical objections? It was a profound question, one that cut to the heart of their mission. Harrison recognized its importance and took a moment to formulate his response. That's a question every soldier should ask, Sullivan, and there's no simple answer. He gestured toward the horizon where heat waves distorted the view. But consider this. Throughout history, technologies that promised to make warfare more humane, more distant, often made it more prevalent instead. Sullivan listened intently as Harrison continued. The longbow, artillery, aircraft, missiles each increased the distance between combatants, made killing less immediate, more abstract. Did that reduce warfare, or did it make it easier to wage, less costly in immediate human terms, but more destructive overall? You're suggesting Prometheus might make war more likely, not less, Sullivan observed. I'm suggesting that removing the human cost, the immediate moral burden of combat decisions, changes the calculus of when and why we fight, Harrison clarified. When warfare becomes a remote, bloodless exercise for one side, the threshold for engaging in it inevitably lowers. Washington, who had been listening nearby, added his perspective. Lost 3 friends in my first deployment. Worst day of my life. But that experience made damn sure I never took another combat decision lightly. No machine can understand that kind of weight. Sullivan nodded slowly, absorbing these viewpoints. Harrison could see the internal struggle continuing behind his eyes, the officer's analytical mind wrestling with complex ethical considerations beyond the technical aspects of their mission. We're not saying technology has no place in warfare, Harrison added more gently. Only that the final judgment, the ultimate responsibility for taking life, should remain with humans who can truly understand its significance. As they remounted Warhammer to continue their exercises, Harrison reflected on Sullivan's question. The young officer was right to wrestle with these issues. The demonstration wasn't just about tank tactics or crew performance. It was about a fundamental question of humanity's relationship with the technologies of war, about where to draw the line between augmenting human capability and replacing human judgment. The afternoon brought new challenges as they practiced rapid deployment and engagement from concealed positions. Sullivan's gunnery skills continued to impress, his technical precision complemented by growing tactical awareness. Washington maintained his reputation as the fastest loader in the division, and Rodriguez demonstrated an intuitive feel for terrain that belied her limited field experience. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Harrison directed them toward their final objective of the day, a mock urban environment at the far end of Training Area 14. This collection of concrete structures, designed to simulate a small town, would present entirely different challenges from the open desert terrain they'd been navigating. Urban environments are where human judgment becomes most critical, Harrison explained as they approached the structures. Civilian presence, complex terrain, limited visibility, restricted movement, all combine to create scenarios whereby the book responses often fail. And where ethical considerations become paramount, Sullivan added, demonstrating his continued reflection on their earlier conversation. Precisely, Harrison nodded. Prometheus might excel at identifying and engaging clear military targets in open terrain. But what about a school being used as a sniper position, a hospital with enemy forces on one floor and civilians on another? These scenarios demand judgment no algorithm can fully encompass. They spent the remaining daylight hours practicing urban combat techniques, with special emphasis on target discrimination and civilian protection. Harrison created increasingly complex scenarios, forcing Sullivan to make split-second decisions about whether to engage or hold fire based on limited information. As darkness fell over Fort Hood, Harrison called an end to the day's exercises. The crew was exhausted but demonstrating clear improvement in both individual skills and team coordination. They had begun to develop the intuitive communication that distinguished elite tank crews, anticipating each other's actions and adapting seamlessly to changing conditions. "Secure the vehicle and get some rest," Harrison ordered as they returned to the motor pool. "Tomorrow we'll focus on night operations and electronic countermeasures. I want everyone fresh and focused." As the crew dispersed, Harrison remained with Warhammer 2, conducting his own inspection of the systems and reviewing the day's performance data. The tank had performed admirably, but he knew they would need every advantage, every refinement to demonstrate the value of human crews against Prometheus's technological superiority. He was still working when Amanda Wells appeared at the edge of the motor pool, her slender figure silhouetted against the security lights. "Burning the midnight oil, Jack?" she asked, approaching with measured steps. "Some things truly never change." Harrison straightened, wiping grease from his hands. "Just making sure everything's in order. I'm sure you're doing the same with Prometheus." She smiled faintly. "Prometheus doesn't require night maintenance. Its diagnostic systems run continuously, self-identifying any issues and alerting the technical team automatically." "Another supposed advantage of machines," Harrison acknowledged, "though I've always found that hands-on inspection catches things automated systems miss." "Perhaps," she conceded. "But then that's always been our fundamental disagreement, hasn't it? The value of human touch versus technological precision." Harrison studied her in the dim light, seeing both the familiar woman he'd once loved and the determined scientist she'd become. "What brings you here at this hour, Amanda? Surely not nostalgia for maintenance bays." "I wanted to see how your preparations are progressing," she replied, glancing at Warhammer 2. "The demonstration is generating significant attention. The Secretary of Defense has confirmed his attendance, along with representatives from several allied nations." "Raising the stakes even higher," Harrison observed. "Is that supposed to intimidate us?" "Not at all. I simply want you to understand the significance of what's happening." She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. "Jack, regardless of the outcome, this demonstration will influence military technology development for decades. Both our approaches will be scrutinized, analyzed, debated at the highest levels." Harrison nodded slowly. "All the more reason to ensure it truly tests what matters most, not just what's easily measured." "And what matters most, in your view?" she asked, though she surely knew his answer. "The human element," Harrison replied without hesitation. "The judgment, adaptability, and moral awareness that no machine, however sophisticated, can truly replicate." Amanda sighed softly. "I used to think we were arguing about capabilities technical versus human. But it's always been about philosophy, hasn't it? About what warfare should be, not just how it should be conducted." "The two can't be separated," Harrison said. "How we fight reflects what we value, what we believe about humanity itself." She considered this, then changed the subject. "Your crew is performing well, better than expected, according to our observation data." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You've been watching our training." "Of course we have," she admitted without apology. "Just as I'm sure you've been gathering whatever intelligence you can about Prometheus. This is a competition, after all." "More than a competition," Harrison corrected. "A demonstration of principles. A test of values as much as capabilities." Amanda studied him for a long moment. "You truly believe that, don't you? That this is some kind of moral crusade, not just a practical evaluation of military technology?" "Don't you?" Harrison countered. "Deep down, isn't this about your vision of what warfare should become, not just what technologies can accomplish?" She didn't answer directly, instead saying, "I should let you finish your work. The demonstration begins in 10 days. I suspect we both have preparations to complete." As she turned to leave, Harrison called after her, "Amanda, one question. If Prometheus achieves everything you hope for, if it proves superior by every metric you've designed, would you personally authorize it to make kill decisions without human confirmation?" She paused, looking back over her shoulder. "That's a policy question, Jack, not a technical one." "It's the only question that ultimately matters," Harrison insisted, "and you haven't answered it." Amanda hesitated, then replied, "I believe properly designed autonomous systems can make more consistent, less biased, lethal force decisions than humans under combat stress. Whether that capability should be fully implemented is indeed a complex ethical question, one that extends beyond my role. A diplomatic non-answer, Harrison observed. A realistic acknowledgement of complexity, she corrected. Something your black and white worldview sometimes struggles with. With that parting observation, she walked away, leaving Harrison alone with Warhammer 2 and his thoughts. Their conversation had confirmed what he already suspected. This demonstration represented a fundamental crossroads in military technology development, with implications far beyond tank warfare. As he completed his inspection and headed toward his quarters, Harrison reflected on the progress they'd made and the challenges still ahead. His crew was coming together impressively, developing the coordination and mutual trust essential to elite tank operations. But Prometheus remained a formidable opponent, designed specifically for this competition, with advantages in speed, precision, and sensor capability that no human crew could match directly. Their path to success lay not in outperforming Prometheus at its strengths, but in demonstrating capabilities the machine couldn't replicate: adaptability to unexpected conditions, ethical judgment in complex scenarios, and the creative problem-solving that emerged from human experience and intuition. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prepare for the demonstration that might determine the future of armored warfare. Harrison was determined to use every minute effectively to forge his crew into a team that could demonstrate why humans, for all their limitations and vulnerabilities, belonged at the heart of combat decisions. As he walked through the quiet base, stars brilliant in the Texas sky above, Harrison felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about preserving a tradition or protecting military jobs. It was about ensuring that warfare, however technologically advanced it became, remained a human endeavor, subject to human judgment and human values. With that conviction firmly in mind, he prepared for whatever challenges the dawn would bring, knowing that each day of preparation brought them closer to the ultimate test against Prometheus and the vision of warfare it represented. Chapter 6. Trapped in Their Own Armor. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intensive training, each session building on skills developed in previous exercises. Harrison drove his crew relentlessly, creating increasingly complex and challenging scenarios designed to forge the intuitive coordination that distinguished elite tank teams. On the fourth morning, they gathered before dawn for their most ambitious exercise yet, a full integration of all elements they had practiced separately, combining stealth movement, rapid engagement, and electronic countermeasures in a continuous operation across varied terrain. Today we put it all together, Harrison announced as they prepared Warhammer 2 in the pre-dawn darkness. The complete package, everything we'll need for the demonstration. Rodriguez approached with a small device in hand, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. Sir, the electronic countermeasure system is complete and installed. It should create temporary sensor disruption within a limited radius around our position. How limited? Harrison asked, examining the device. Approximately 300 meters, sir. Any closer and it might be detected as deliberate interference rather than an environmental anomaly. Harrison nodded approvingly. Good work, Private. We'll test it under actual conditions today. Washington completed his inspection of the ammunition storage, each round checked and positioned for optimal loading speed. All ammunition secured and ready, sir, including the special training rounds you requested. The special rounds contain modified payloads that would create distinctive sensor signatures, allowing them to evaluate how Prometheus might interpret and respond to unusual targets. Nothing outside regulation, but certainly creative applications of standard equipment. Sullivan joined them, his tablet displaying a detailed analysis of the day's training route. Sir, I've identified optimal engagement positions along our planned path, with particular attention to areas where terrain features could be used for hull-down positioning. Harrison studied Sullivan's work, noting the thorough integration of their previous training elements. The lieutenant was demonstrating impressive growth, combining his technical expertise with increasingly creative tactical thinking. Excellent preparation, Lieutenant, Harrison acknowledged. Rodriguez, are you confident in the navigation route, including the sensor dead zones we identified? She nodded firmly. Yes, sir, I've memorized the entire path, including alternate routes if we encounter unexpected obstacles. Then let's move out, Harrison ordered, mounting the tank. Full integration exercise, all elements, maximum realism. As Warhammer 2 rumbled to life, Harrison settled into the commander's position, feeling the familiar vibration of the massive vehicle beneath him. Despite its age and technological disadvantages compared to Prometheus, the Abrams remained a magnificent fighting machine, a perfect blend of firepower, protection, immobility. The exercise began with a stealth approach across open desert terrain, Rodriguez demonstrating exceptional skill in using microterrain features for concealment while maintaining efficient progress toward their first objective. Sullivan maintained continuous sensor surveillance, identifying and tracking simulated enemy positions with growing confidence. Observation drone at our 3 o'clock, sir, Sullivan reported approximately 20 minutes into the exercise. Appears to be running a standard search pattern. Acknowledged, Harrison responded. Rodriguez, find us some cover. Washington, prepare for potential engagement. Rodriguez guided the tank into a shallow depression, using a small rise to shield them from aerial observation. Washington readied the main gun, loading one of the special training rounds they had prepared. Drone is moving to investigate our last known position, Sullivan updated. Thermal imaging active based on its flight pattern. Perfect, Harrison smiled. Rodriguez, activate the countermeasure system. She flipped the switch on her newly installed device, sending a carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulse designed to create temporary confusion in electronic sensing systems. The pulse was too weak to cause actual damage or be interpreted as a hostile electronic attack, but sufficient to introduce uncertainty into automated targeting algorithms. Countermeasure active, sir, Rodriguez confirmed. Duration approximately 45 seconds before automatic shutdown to prevent detection. They watched as the drone's flight pattern became erratic, its search algorithm apparently struggling to process conflicting sensor data. After several moments of confusion, it resumed a standard search pattern, but in a different sector from their actual position. It worked, Sullivan observed with quiet amazement. The drone's behavior indicates sensor confusion and target loss. Harrison nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. And that, crew, is why human judgment remains essential in warfare. Machines follow their programming, however sophisticated. When that programming encounters unexpected conditions, they fall back on standard protocols, Washington finished. Predictable, even when confused. Precisely, Harrison confirmed. Let's continue to Objective 2, maintain stealth profile. The exercise progressed through increasingly complex phases, including simulated engagements against multiple targets, rapid position changes to avoid counter-battery fire, and navigation through restricted terrain features. Throughout it all, the crew demonstrated growing cohesion, anticipating each other's needs and responding to changing conditions with minimal verbal communication. By mid-morning, they had reached the mock urban environment that represented their final objective. Here, Harrison had arranged for the most challenging test yet, a complex scenario involving civilian presence, restricted engagement zones, and limited visibility. This phase simulates conditions where ethical judgment becomes paramount, Harrison explained as they prepared to enter the urban complex. Sullivan, you will encounter targets that require split-second discrimination between legitimate military objectives and protected civilian entities. Sullivan nodded solemnly, understanding the significance of this test. Rules of engagement, sir. Standard counterinsurgency protocol, Harrison replied. Positive identification required before engagement. Minimum force necessary to neutralize threats. Maximum protection for civilian entities. For the next hour, they navigated the complex urban environment, encountering a series of challenging scenarios carefully crafted to test the ethical judgment aspects of tank warfare that Harrison believed no autonomous system could adequately replicate. Sullivan performed admirably, demonstrating not just technical proficiency, but thoughtful discrimination in target selection. In one particularly challenging scenario, he correctly identified a simulated civilian carrying farming equipment that might have been misinterpreted as a weapon, holding fire despite the momentary uncertainty. Excellent restraint, Lieutenant, Harrison commended. That's precisely the kind of judgment call we need to highlight during the demonstration. The ability to process contextual information, to sense when something doesn't quite fit the expected pattern. As they completed the urban phase and prepared to return to base, Harrison felt genuine pride in his crew's performance. They had come farther in a week of intensive training than most crews achieved in months of standard preparation. The question remaining was whether it would be enough to demonstrate the value of human judgment against Prometheus's technological advantages. They were approximately halfway back to base when an unexpected communication came through on their radio. Warhammer 2, this is range control. Priority message over. Harrison frowned. They weren't scheduled for any communications during this exercise. This is Warhammer 2. Send your message over. Captain Harrison, you are directed to proceed immediately to Training Area 17 for an unscheduled evaluation exercise. Authorization code Alpha 73 Delta, Colonel Reynolds confirming. Harrison recognized the authorization code as legitimate, though the unusual directive raised immediate questions. Training Area 17 was one of the largest and most isolated sections of Fort Hood, typically reserved for live fire exercises involving multiple units. Acknowledged range control, redirecting to Training Area 17. Any additional information about the nature of this evaluation? Negative Warhammer 2, you will receive full briefing upon arrival. Range control out. Harrison considered the situation carefully. The authorization was valid, but the sudden change in schedule was highly unusual, particularly given their proximity to the official demonstration date. Change of plans, crew, he announced after a moment's deliberation. We're redirecting to Training Area 17. Rodriguez, plot us the most direct route. Yes, sir, she responded, already adjusting their navigation. ETA approximately 40 minutes at standard movement rate. Sullivan, continuous scan for aerial observation. Washington, secure all special training rounds. We don't know what we're walking into. The crew responded with prompt efficiency, adjusting to the unexpected development with the adaptability Harrison had worked to instill. As they altered course toward Training Area 17, Harrison couldn't shake a sense of unease about the situation. Sir, Sullivan spoke up after several minutes of silent progress. Do you find this directive unusual? An unscheduled evaluation this close to the demonstration? Very unusual, Lieutenant, Harrison confirmed. Keep your eyes sharp. This could be part of the test. Training Area 17 came into view after approximately 30 minutes of travel. A vast expanse of open terrain punctuated by scattered vegetation and the occasional rocky outcropping. As they approached the designated coordinates, Harrison spotted a group of vehicles parked near a temporary command post, including one he immediately recognized as Amanda's unmarked SUV. Interesting, he murmured. Looks like Dr. Wells is involved in this unexpected exercise. They brought Warhammer 2 to a halt at the indicated position, maintaining standard tactical readiness as Harrison opened the commander's hatch to survey the situation. Amanda stood near the command post alongside several military officers and what appeared to be technical personnel, all watching their arrival with evident interest. Secure the vehicle, but remain ready for immediate operation, Harrison instructed his crew as he prepared to disembark. This situation feels like a pop quiz before the final exam. He climbed down from the tank and approached the assembled group, noting Colonel Reynolds among those present. Amanda stepped forward to meet him, her expression unreadable. Captain Harrison, she greeted him formally. Thank you for responding so promptly to the redirection. We aim to please, Doctor, Harrison replied evenly, though I admit to some curiosity about this unscheduled evaluation. Reynolds approached, offering a brief explanation. Jack, the Oversight Committee requested a preliminary assessment of both Warhammer 2 and Prometheus before the main demonstration, a sort of calibration exercise to establish performance benchmarks. Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly. I see, and when were you planning to inform my crew about this calibration exercise? The short notice was intentional, Amanda interjected, to assess your ability to adapt to unexpected developments, an essential quality in combat operations, as you've often emphasized. Harrison couldn't argue with the logic, though he suspected there might be additional motivations behind the sudden evaluation. What exactly does this exercise entail? Reynolds gestured toward the far end of the training area, where a series of target arrays had been established at varying distances. Standard engagement protocol, stationary and moving targets ranging from 500 to 2,500 meters. Both Warhammer 2 and Prometheus will conduct identical engagement sequences for direct performance comparison. And where's my mechanical opponent? Harrison asked, scanning the area. As if in response to his question, a low rumble drew their attention to the opposite side of the training ground. Emerging from behind a natural ridgeline came Prometheus, its sleek profile unlike any tank Harrison had ever commanded. Lower to the ground than the Abrams, with a more integrated turret design and multiple sensor arrays visible on its surface, the autonomous tank projected an aura of predatory efficiency. Impressive machine, Harrison acknowledged, studying his opponent. I assume it's fully operational for this exercise? Fully operational, but operating under restricted parameters, Amanda confirmed, as will Warhammer 2. This is an evaluation of basic engagement capabilities, only firepower, accuracy, target acquisition, and response time. Harrison understood immediately. This preliminary exercise had been designed to showcase Prometheus's strength, precision gunnery, rapid target acquisition, in lightning fast response time while minimizing the areas where human judgment might demonstrate advantages. Convenient parameters, he observed, meeting Amanda's gaze directly, almost as if they were selected to favor certain capabilities over others. She didn't deny it. The demonstration will include more complex scenarios that test the full range of combat decision-making. Today is simply about establishing a performance baseline. Harrison nodded slowly, accepting the situation for what it was. Then let's establish that baseline. My crew is ready. He returned to Warhammer 2, quickly briefing his team on the unexpected exercise and its parameters. This is a deliberate showcase of Prometheus's technical advantages, he explained frankly. They want raw performance data that will make the machine look good speed, precision, consistency. So we're meant to be outperformed, Sullivan asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. On these specific metrics, almost certainly, and Harrison acknowledged. But that doesn't mean we don't give it our absolute best effort. More importantly, we observe how Prometheus operates, gathering intelligence for the main demonstration. Washington grinned slightly. Know your enemy, sir. Exactly, Sergeant. This is as much an intelligence gathering and opportunity for us as it is for them. Rodriguez, Sullivan, pay close attention to how Prometheus moves, how it acquires targets, any patterns or tendencies you can identify. With this understanding, they prepared for the evaluation exercise. A range officer approached, providing detailed instructions for the engagement sequence. 20 targets, stationary and moving, to be engaged in order of presentation. Standard scoring based on accuracy, time to engagement, and ammunition expenditure. Warhammer 2 will conduct the sequence first, the officer informed them, followed by Prometheus under identical conditions. Harrison acknowledged the instructions, then settled into the commander's position as his crew prepared for the engagement. He could feel their determination, their pride as soldiers unwilling to be shown up by a machine, regardless of the technical advantages it might possess. Crew ready, Harrison confirmed when all preparations were complete. Commence engagement sequence on my mark, the range officer's voice came through their communication system. 3, 2, 1, mark! The exercise unfolded precisely as Harrison had anticipated. Sullivan demonstrated exceptional gunnery skills, engaging each target with impressive accuracy. Washington maintained a loading pace that would have been commendable for any tank crew in the Army. Rodriguez positioned the tank optimally for each engagement, minimizing exposure while maximizing firing stability. Yet despite their excellent performance, Harrison knew they were operating at the limits of human capability, while Prometheus would likely perform these basic functions with machine precision. The evaluation had indeed been designed to showcase the autonomous system's advantages in straightforward, technical operations. When they completed the sequence, Harrison ordered Rodriguez to position them where they could observe Prometheus's performance. Let's see what our opponent can do, he said, focusing his binoculars on the autonomous tank. Prometheus began its engagement sequence with unnerving efficiency. Its turret movements were fluid and precise, target acquisition nearly instantaneous. Each round found its mark with perfect accuracy, the autonomous loader system operating with the mechanical consistency that no human could match. Impressive, Sullivan acknowledged quietly, watching through his own optics. Target acquisition time is approximately 1.5 seconds faster than our best performance. Notice the firing rhythm, Harrison pointed out. Absolutely consistent. No variation between engagements. Washington nodded. No fatigue, no hesitation, no human variables. Exactly, Harrison confirmed. And in a basic gunnery exercise, that's an advantage. But in actual combat, predictability becomes vulnerability. Rodriguez finished the thought. A consistent pattern can be anticipated and exploited. They continued observing as Prometheus completed the engagement sequence, its performance statistically superior to their own by every measured metric. When the exercise concluded, the range officer approached Warhammer 2 with the preliminary results. Initial data shows Prometheus outperformed Warhammer 2 by an average of 22% across all measured parameters, he reported neutrally. Particularly significant advantages in target acquisition time and engagement consistency. Harrison accepted the information without visible reaction. Thank you, Lieutenant. Is that the conclusion of today's evaluation? Yes, sir. You're cleared to return to base. The committee has what it needed. As they prepared to depart, Amanda approached Warhammer 2, her expression suggesting she was well aware of the exercise's outcome. Your crew performed admirably, Jack, she offered. Top percentile human performance by any standard. But still human, Harrison replied, with all the limitations that implies, at least according to your metrics. She nodded slightly. The data speaks for itself. In basic engagement parameters, Prometheus demonstrated significant advantages. In a carefully controlled exercise focusing exclusively on technical performance, Harrison agreed. But war isn't conducted on firing ranges with predetermined targets and perfect visibility. The full demonstration will include more complex scenarios, Amanda assured him. Today was simply about establishing objective performance baselines. Harrison studied her for a moment. You know, Amanda, for someone who claims to be conducting an impartial evaluation, you seem remarkably pleased with these preliminary results. She didn't deny it. I believe in what Prometheus represents a future where military objectives can be achieved without risking human lives unnecessarily. Today's data supports that vision. Data always depends on what you choose to measure, Harrison countered, and what you choose to ignore. With that observation, he returned to his commander's position, ordering Rodriguez to take them back to base. As Warhammer 2 moved away from the evaluation site, Harrison considered the implications of what they had witnessed. The exercise had indeed demonstrated Prometheus's technical superiority in basic gunnery and target engagement precisely as Amanda had intended. The autonomous system was faster, more precise, and more consistent than even the best human crew could be. But Harrison had also observed vulnerabilities: the machine's predictable engagement pattern, its reliance on standard targeting protocols, its optimization for efficiency rather than adaptability. These were insights they could potentially exploit during the main demonstration, particularly in more complex scenarios requiring judgment and creative problem-solving. Sir, Sullivan spoke up as they continued toward base, I've been analyzing Prometheus's performance data. There's something interesting in its target prioritization sequence. Go on, Harrison encouraged. It follows a perfect optimization algorithm, engaging targets in order of calculated threat level and engagement efficiency, absolutely consistent and logical. Harrison nodded, seeing where Sullivan was heading. And in combat, that predictability creates an opportunity for deception. Present false threat indicators, manipulate its prioritization algorithm. Exactly, sir, Sullivan confirmed, his tactical mind clearly engaged with the problem. If we could create a scenario where the optimal mathematical solution is actually suboptimal in practice, we demonstrate a fundamental limitation of autonomous systems, Harrison finished. Their inability to detect deception or recognize when something doesn't feel right the way an experienced human commander might. The crew fell into thoughtful silence, each processing what they had witnessed and its implications for the upcoming demonstration. They had been outperformed in raw technical parameters, as expected, but they had also gained valuable insights into their opponent's capabilities and potential vulnerabilities. Don't be discouraged by today's results, Harrison told his crew as they approached Fort Hood's main complex. Remember, we're not trying to beat Prometheus at what it does best: technical precision and consistency. We're demonstrating what it cannot do: intuitive judgment, creative adaptation, ethical decision-making under ambiguous conditions. Washington nodded firmly. Sir, I've served under tank commanders who could hit targets by feel that no targeting computer could acquire, who could sense ambushes before any sensor detected them. That's what we need to show. And we will, Sergeant, Harrison assured him. Today they measured what machines do best. In the actual demonstration, we'll show what humans do best. As they returned to the motor pool and secured Warhammer 2 for maintenance, Harrison noticed the subtle but unmistakable shift in his crew's demeanor. The preliminary evaluation, rather than demoralizing them, had crystallized their purpose, sharpened their focus on the unique advantages human crews brought to armored warfare. Sullivan approached as Harrison completed his post-operation inspection. Sir, I'd like to propose some modifications to our training regime for the remaining days before the demonstration. Based on what we observed today, I believe we can develop specific tactics to highlight human decision-making advantages in complex scenarios. Harrison smiled, appreciating the lieutenant's initiative. I'm all ears, Sullivan. What do you have in mind? For the next hour, they discussed training refinements, focusing on scenarios that would emphasize the aspects of tank warfare where human judgment and intuition offered irreplaceable advantages. Sullivan's analytical mind, combined with Washington's combat experience and Rodriguez's technical insights, created a comprehensive approach that leveraged their strengths while accounting for Prometheus's demonstrated capabilities. As they finalized their plans, Colonel Reynolds approached, having just returned from the evaluation site. Jack, got a minute? Harrison excused himself from the crew and walked with Reynolds toward the edge of the motor pool. That was quite a show today, Frank, almost as if it was choreographed to highlight Prometheus's advantages. Reynolds didn't deny it. The committee wanted comparative data on basic performance metrics. You know as well as I do how these things work. The brass wants numbers, statistics, concrete measurements. And they got them, Harrison acknowledged. I just hope they understand that tank warfare involves more than target acquisition times and firing precision. That's what the full demonstration is for, Reynolds assured him. Today was just a preliminary evaluation. Harrison studied his old friend carefully. Level with me, Frank. How much pressure is coming down from above to ensure Prometheus succeeds? Reynolds hesitated, glancing around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. Significant, he admitted quietly. There's major investment behind this program, both financial and political. A lot of careers and contracts riding on positive results. And what about the actual implications for warfare, for the soldiers who will have to live with these decisions? That's why you're here, Jack, Reynolds replied seriously, to make sure those considerations aren't lost in the rush toward automation. He paused, then added, for what it's worth, I think your crew performed exceptionally today. Top-tier human performance by any standard. Thanks, Frank. But we both know this isn't really about performance standards. It's about what kind of warfare we want to conduct, what values we want to preserve. Reynolds nodded slowly. 8 days until the main demonstration, Jack. Make them count. As Reynolds departed, Harrison rejoined his crew, who were already discussing refinements to Rodriguez's electronic countermeasure system based on what they had observed of Prometheus's sensor operations. All right, team, Harrison announced, drawing their attention. Today we saw exactly what we're up against. Prometheus has every technical advantage in basic operations, exactly as we expected. Our path forward isn't trying to outshoot a machine designed specifically for shooting. It's demonstrating the aspects of warfare that can't be reduced to algorithms and response times. Washington nodded firmly. The things that make us human, sir. Precisely, Sergeant. 8 days until the demonstration. Let's make every minute count. With renewed purpose, they returned to their training preparations, determined to prove that despite Prometheus's impressive technical capabilities, there remained essential aspects of warfare that required human judgment, human experience, and human values. The preliminary evaluation had shown them the mountain they needed to climb, but it had also revealed potential paths to the summit. As the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Fort Hood's sprawling complex, Harrison felt a quiet confidence taking root. They faced a formidable opponent designed specifically to excel in measurable performance metrics. But they had something Prometheus could never have, no matter how sophisticated its programming: the human spirit with all its creativity, intuition, and moral awareness. In 8 days, they would have their chance to demonstrate why that spirit remained essential to warfare, however technologically advanced it became. And Harrison was determined to make the most of every moment between now and then, preparing his crew not just to compete against a machine, but to showcase the irreplaceable value of human judgment in the gravest decisions any society could make: when, where, and how to apply lethal force in defense of its values and its people. Chapter 7, Death Valley. The setback of the preliminary evaluation galvanized Harrison's crew rather than demoralizing them. With clear evidence of Prometheus's technical advantages, they focused their remaining training time on scenarios designed to highlight the aspects of tank warfare where human judgment offered irreplaceable benefits. 6 days before the demonstration, Harrison led them to one of Fort Hood's most challenging training environments, a rugged valley with steep sides and complex terrain features, known informally among tank crews as Death Valley for its difficulty and the frequency with which units died during exercises there. This terrain creates multiple tactical challenges, Harrison explained, as they surveyed the valley from an overlooking ridge. Limited maneuver space, restricted fields of fire, multiple avenues of approach, and significant obstacles to both movement and communication. Sullivan studied the valley through binoculars, his tactical mind assessing the features. Ideal for demonstrating adaptation to complex conditions, sir. Standard engagement protocols would be severely constrained here. Exactly, Harrison nodded. And that's precisely why it's perfect for our training. The main demonstration will undoubtedly include at least one scenario with similarly challenging terrain. Mastering this environment gives us a critical advantage. For the next several hours, they practiced movement and engagement techniques specifically adapted to the valley's challenging conditions. Rodriguez demonstrated remarkable skill in navigating the narrow passages and steep gradients, using the terrain to maximum advantage while avoiding the worst obstacles. Sullivan developed modified targeting approaches for the restricted sight lines and frequent dead zones, while Washington refined his loading procedures to accommodate the frequent shifts in ammunition type necessitated by the varied engagement distances. As noon approached, Harrison introduced a new element to their training: communication limitations. Using a small electronic device provided by Rodriguez, he created localized interference that disrupted their normal communication systems, forcing the crew to rely on alternative methods. In actual combat, enemy electronic warfare frequently degrades communication, Harrison explained. Prometheus is designed to function optimally with perfect information flow between its systems. Let's see how it might handle disruption. The crew adapted quickly, developing hand signals, abbreviated verbal codes, and mechanical indicators to maintain coordination despite the communication challenges. Harrison watched with satisfaction as they demonstrated the human ability to improvise and adapt circumstances no programmer could fully anticipate. By mid-afternoon, they had progressed to complex engagement scenarios involving multiple simulated threats approaching from different directions simultaneously. Sullivan coordinated with Rodriguez to maintain optimal firing positions while managing ammunition conservation, demonstrating the integrated decision-making that distinguished experienced tank crews. "Sir," Washington called during a brief pause in the exercises, "incoming vehicle approaching our position. Looks like Colonel Reynolds." Harrison spotted the approaching jeep and ordered a halt to their current exercise. Reynolds pulled up beside Warhammer 2, his expression serious as he climbed out to speak with Harrison. "Jack, we need to talk," he said without preamble, privately. Harrison nodded and followed Reynolds a short distance from the tank, out of earshot of the crew. "What's going on, Frank?" Reynolds glanced back toward the crew, then spoke in a low voice. "The demonstration parameters have been finalized and submitted to the Oversight Committee. I thought you should know what you're facing." Harrison's interest sharpened. "I'm listening." "3 scenarios as expected," Reynolds explained. "Urban environment, open desert, and mixed terrain similar to this valley. But there's an additional element they have added. Each scenario includes a wild card factor, an unexpected development designed to test adaptability." "What kind of wild card?" "That's the thing," Reynolds frowned. "It's classified at the highest level. Not even I have full details. All I know is that each scenario will include a significant unexpected element that neither you nor Prometheus has specifically trained for." Harrison considered this information, designed to test genuine adaptability rather than prepared responses. "Actually, that might work in our favor." "There's more," Reynolds continued. "The scoring system has been adjusted. Technical performance metrics, accuracy, engagement speed, ammunition efficiency still count for 60% of the total score. And the other 40%? Mission accomplishment, collateral damage avoidance, and what they're calling judgment in ambiguous conditions." Reynolds met Harrison's gaze directly. "That last category is subjectively evaluated by the committee." Harrison understood the implication immediately, meaning it could be interpreted however necessary to ensure the desired outcome. Reynolds didn't deny it. "Politics is definitely in play here, Jack. Major defense contracts and military doctrine for the next 20 years riding on this demonstration." Harrison absorbed this soberly. "Thanks for the heads up, Frank. Anything else I should know?" Reynolds hesitated, then added, "Amanda's team has been working around the clock on Prometheus's ethical decision-making algorithms. Word is they have made significant improvements specifically to address your criticisms about human judgment in complex scenarios." "Trying to program human ethical reasoning?" Harrison raised an eyebrow. "That should be interesting." "Don't underestimate them, Jack," Reynolds warned. "This isn't just about technology versus tradition anymore. It's become a high-stakes proving ground for competing visions of future warfare." After Reynolds departed, Harrison returned to his crew, considering how much of this information to share. Ultimately, he decided on complete transparency. They would need every advantage, including full awareness of the challenges they faced. "The demonstration parameters have been set," he informed them, outlining what Reynolds had shared. 3 scenarios, each with an unexpected element designed to test genuine adaptability. Scoring heavily weighted toward technical performance, but with a subjective component for judgment in ambiguous conditions. Sullivan processed this thoughtfully. "The unexpected elements could work to our advantage, sir. Humans typically adapt better to truly novel situations than algorithmic systems. That's what I'm counting on, Lieutenant, Harrison agreed. But we should expect Prometheus to demonstrate more sophisticated decision-making than what we observed in the preliminary evaluation. Dr. Wells's team has apparently been enhancing its ethical reasoning capabilities. Washington snorted skeptically. Programming ethics into a machine? Good luck with that. Don't dismiss it too quickly, Sergeant, Harrison cautioned. They'll undoubtedly have designed impressive algorithms to simulate ethical decision-making. Our job is to demonstrate why simulation isn't the same as genuine human judgment. Rodriguez, who had been quiet during this discussion, finally spoke up. Sir, based on what we know about Prometheus's systems, I think there might be a vulnerability we could potentially exploit. Harrison turned to her with interest. Go on, Private. Autonomous systems like Prometheus prioritize mission objectives and rule-based constraints. They optimize for the best solution within those parameters. She hesitated, then continued. But they struggle with situations where optimal solutions for different priority objectives come into direct conflict. It forces the system to make value judgments that aren't easily reducible to algorithms. Sullivan nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Creating scenarios where protection of civilians and mission accomplishment require mutually exclusive actions. Exactly, Rodriguez confirmed. Or where the rules of engagement conflict with tactical necessity. These edge cases create processing bottlenecks in autonomous systems, often leading to delayed decision-making or defaulting to predetermined safety protocols. Harrison studied the young private with new appreciation. Her insider knowledge of autonomous systems development was proving invaluable. So we design our responses in the demonstration to highlight these edge cases, forcing Prometheus to reveal the limitations of programmed ethics versus human moral reasoning. Yes, sir, Rodriguez nodded. It wouldn't be cheating just using our understanding of the technology to demonstrate its fundamental limitations. Harrison smiled slightly. Well done, Private. That insight gives us a potential advantage in the subjective evaluation categories. With this new perspective, they resumed their training in Death Valley, now incorporating scenarios specifically designed to highlight the edge cases Rodriguez had identified. Sullivan created engagement sequences that required nuanced ethical judgments about target priority and force application, while Washington and Rodriguez worked to ensure flawless, technical execution of whatever decisions Harrison made. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, Harrison called an end to the day's exercises. The crew was exhausted but demonstrating clear improvement in both individual skills and collective coordination. More importantly, they had begun to develop a coherent strategy for the demonstration, focusing on areas where human judgment offered genuine advantages over even the most sophisticated autonomous systems. Secure the vehicle and get some rest, Harrison ordered as they prepared to return to base. Tomorrow we focus on the urban scenario. I want everyone fresh and focused. As the crew began their post-operation procedures, Sullivan approached Harrison privately. Sir, may I speak freely? Always, Lieutenant. Sullivan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I've been thinking about what Rodriguez said regarding edge cases in ethical decision-making. It occurs to me that many of history's most crucial military decisions weren't about finding optimal solutions, but about recognizing when established protocols needed to be abandoned entirely. Harrison nodded, impressed by Sullivan's insight. Like your father disobeying direct orders because his judgment told him the situation had changed. Exactly, sir, Sullivan confirmed, a new understanding in his eyes. No algorithm, however sophisticated, can determine when its own governing rules should be broken. That requires a kind of self-awareness and contextual judgment that may be uniquely human. That's precisely what we need to demonstrate, Harrison agreed. Not just that humans can make better decisions within established parameters, but that we can recognize when those parameters themselves have become obstacles to the right decision. As they returned to base, Harrison reflected on how far Sullivan had come since their first meeting. The by-the-book officer was evolving before his eyes, developing the nuanced understanding of warfare that had distinguished his father. Not by abandoning procedures and protocols, but by recognizing their proper place as tools rather than constraints on human judgment. The coming demonstration would test not just their tactical skills and crew coordination, but their ability to articulate through action why human moral reasoning remained essential to warfare. Against Prometheus's impressive technology and carefully programmed ethics, they would need to demonstrate something machines could simulate but never truly possess: the human capacity for wisdom, for understanding that sometimes the right decision can't be calculated, only felt. With that challenge clearly before them, Harrison led his crew back to Fort Hood, their determination strengthened by the knowledge that in 5 days, they would face a test that might help determine not just the future of tank warfare, but the very nature of human involvement in conflicts yet to come. Chapter 8, Eagle Eye. The fourth day before the demonstration brought a new dimension to their preparation. Harrison had arranged for them to observe Prometheus during its own training exercises, an opportunity to study their opponent in action without the controlled conditions of the preliminary evaluation. "Know your enemy," Harrison quoted as they set up an observation position on a ridgeline overlooking one of Fort Hood's primary training areas. Sun Tzu understood that victory often depends more on understanding your opponent than on your own capabilities. Through high-powered optics, they watched as Prometheus navigated a complex obstacle course, demonstrating remarkable mobility despite its substantial weight. The autonomous tank moved with mechanical precision, each maneuver executed with optimal efficiency, neither too fast nor too slow for the conditions. "Notice the movement pattern," Harrison directed, "perfectly calculated for the terrain, maintaining ideal speed for the conditions. Impressive, but also predictable." Sullivan observed thoughtfully. "It follows optimal paths with mathematical precision. No wasted motion, no intuitive adjustments." "Exactly," Harrison nodded. "In predictable conditions, that's an advantage, but in chaotic, rapidly changing environments, it becomes a vulnerability," Washington completed. "Human drivers adjust continuously based on feel, sometimes taking suboptimal routes that turn out better because of factors the math can't account for." They continued observing as Prometheus began engagement exercises, targeting static and moving objects with impressive precision. Its main gun traversed with fluid mechanical grace, acquiring and engaging targets with consistent timing. "Response time is nearly identical between engagements," Sullivan noted, timing the sequences. 2.7 seconds from target presentation to firing, regardless of complexity or position. "Consistent but inflexible," Harrison observed. "No prioritization for unusual threats, no intuitive focus on subtle danger indicators." Rodriguez, who had been recording Prometheus's electronic emissions, added her own observations. "Its sensor suite is operating at maximum capacity continuously. No power conservation, no selective focus. It's processing everything simultaneously, which works fine in limited engagement scenarios," Harrison noted, "but could create processing bottlenecks in more complex environments with multiple information streams." For several hours, they studied Prometheus's operations, noting patterns, tendencies, and potential vulnerabilities that might be exploited during the demonstration. Harrison encouraged each crew member to focus on aspects relevant to their specific role: Sullivan on targeting patterns, Washington on engagement sequences, Rodriguez on movement and electronic signatures. By mid-afternoon, they had compiled a comprehensive assessment of Prometheus's capabilities and limitations. The autonomous tank was indeed formidable, combining advanced sensors, sophisticated targeting algorithms, and mechanical consistency beyond human capability. Yet they had also identified potential weaknesses: its predictable movement patterns, its uniform response timing regardless of threat level, and its apparent inability to prioritize information processing under complex conditions. "Sir," Sullivan spoke up as they prepared to conclude their observation session, "I've been thinking about the upcoming urban scenario. Based on what we've seen, Prometheus will likely excel at target identification and engagement in structured environments. But urban warfare involves significant ambiguity, particularly in civilian presence scenarios." Harrison nodded encouragingly. "Continue, Lieutenant. What if we deliberately create situations where the technically optimal solution conflicts with the ethically appropriate one? Force Prometheus to choose between perfect tactical execution and moral considerations that might not be fully captured in its programming?" Harrison smiled slightly, recognizing the strategic insight behind Sullivan's suggestion. "Precisely the kind of thinking we need, Lieutenant. In the demonstration, we won't outperform Prometheus on technical metrics, but we can demonstrate the limitations of program decision-making in morally complex scenarios." As they returned to base, Harrison's thoughts turned to the broader implications of their observations. Prometheus represented the culmination of decades of military technology development, designed to remove humans from harm's way while maintaining or even improving combat effectiveness. Yet watching it operate, he had seen not just impressive capabilities but fundamental limitations. The machine's inability to feel uncertainty, to sense when something wasn't quite right, to make the intuitive leaps that often meant the difference between disaster and survival in actual combat. That evening, Harrison gathered his crew in the officers' club, continuing their tradition of breaking bread together away from the structured training environment. The atmosphere was more serious than previous gatherings, the reality of the coming demonstration weighing on each of them. 4 days, Washington remarked, staring into his drink. 4 days until we either prove humans still belong in tanks or become a historical footnote. That's one way to look at it, Sergeant, Harrison acknowledged. But I prefer to think we're demonstrating something more fundamental than just who belongs in tanks. We're showing why human judgment matters in warfare, why moral agency can't be programmed or simulated. Sullivan, who had been quiet throughout dinner, finally spoke. Sir, I've been thinking about my father, about the way he died, making a judgment call that no algorithm would have made, putting himself at risk to protect others. Harrison nodded, understanding the significance of Sullivan revisiting this painful topic. Your father made a choice, Michael, a human choice, based on values and priorities that transcended tactical optimization. That's what we're really fighting for, isn't it? Sullivan continued. Not just jobs or tradition, but the principle that warfare, however terrible, should remain an extension of human will, human values, human judgment, with all the moral weight that entails. Exactly, Lieutenant, Harrison confirmed quietly. That's precisely what's at stake. Rodriguez, who had been listening intently, added her perspective. When I worked in autonomous systems, we spent thousands of hours trying to program ethical decision-making into AI, creating rule systems, priority hierarchies, consequence evaluation algorithms. She shook her head slightly. But we could never capture the intuitive moral reasoning that humans perform instantly and unconsciously. Because moral reasoning isn't just calculation, Harrison observed. It's feeling, intuition, values, context recognition. It's understanding why rules exist and when they should be broken. Washington raised his glass. To human judgment, may it never be replaced by algorithms, however sophisticated. They drank to that, a moment of shared conviction binding them as more than just a tank crew. They had become defenders of a principle that extended far beyond armored warfare. The essential role of human moral agency in the gravest decisions any society could make. As they prepared to depart, Sullivan lingered, clearly wanting to speak privately with Harrison. When the others had gone, he finally voiced what had been on his mind. Sir, whatever happens in the demonstration, I want you to know that I understand now what my father saw in you as a commander. It wasn't just tactical skill or courage, though you have both. It was your unwavering belief that warfare must remain humane, even when it can't be humanitarian. Harrison was touched by the acknowledgement, recognizing the journey Sullivan had made from resentment to understanding. Your father would be proud of the officer you've become, Michael. Not because you're following his path, but because you're finding your own, guided by the same core principles. Sullivan nodded, accepting this assessment. 4 more days of preparation, sir. What should we focus on? Integration, Harrison replied without hesitation. We've developed the individual skills and tactical approaches. Now we need to ensure they function seamlessly as a unified whole, adapting to whatever unexpected elements the demonstration throws at us. With that plan established, they parted for the night, each carrying the weight of the coming challenge and the principles they were fighting to defend. In 4 days, they would face Prometheus in a contest that might help shape military technology development for decades to come. Harrison was determined to ensure that whatever the outcome, they would demonstrate why human judgment, with all its flaws and limitations, remained essential to warfare in the modern age. As he walked through the quiet base toward his quarters, Harrison's thoughts turned to Amanda and the vision of warfare she represented. He wondered if, beneath her commitment to autonomous systems, she still understood the moral weight of the decisions such systems would make, the profound responsibility of programming machines to take human lives based on algorithmic calculations rather than human judgment. Tomorrow would bring another day of intensive preparation, another step toward the demonstration that might determine whether warfare remained a human endeavor or became increasingly automated, increasingly distant from the moral weight it had carried throughout human history. With that sobering thought, Harrison prepared for rest, knowing that the coming days would demand everything his crew could give, and perhaps more. Not just technical proficiency or tactical creativity, but a compelling demonstration of why human judgment, with all its imperfections, remained irreplaceable in the gravest decisions any society could make. The morning of the demonstration dawned with an unexpected challenge. A massive dust storm had rolled across Fort Hood during the night, reducing visibility to less than 100 meters and casting an eerie orange glow over the base. Harrison stood at the window of his quarters, watching fine particles of sand drift through the air like amber snow. Perfect, he murmured, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. The weather conditions would complicate the demonstration significantly, particularly for the sophisticated sensor systems Prometheus relied upon. Nature had provided an unexpected ally in their quest to showcase the value of human judgment in unpredictable conditions. When Harrison arrived at the motor pool, he found his crew already preparing Warhammer 2 for the day's challenges. Sullivan was conducting a final systems check, Washington was inspecting each round of ammunition personally, and Rodriguez was making last-minute adjustments to their communications equipment. "Morning, crew," Harrison greeted them. "I see you've noticed our atmospheric advantage." Washington grinned, wiping dust from the main gun's muzzle brake. "Mother Nature decided to level the playing field a bit, sir. The dust will degrade optical and infrared sensors," Sullivan observed, his expression thoughtful. "Prometheus will have to rely more heavily on radar and other electromagnetic systems, which have their own limitations in these conditions." Rodriguez looked up from her work on the communications array. "I've modified our systems to compensate for interference from the particulate matter, sir. We should maintain clearer communications than standard equipment would allow." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Good work, all of you. This demonstration was always going to test adaptability to unexpected conditions. The weather just made that aspect more prominent." Colonel Reynolds approached, his uniform already showing signs of the omnipresent dust, despite the short walk from headquarters. "Jack, the committee wants to proceed despite the conditions. They're viewing it as an additional test parameter." "Fine by me, Frank," Harrison replied. "Real warfare doesn't wait for perfect weather." Reynolds lowered his voice, glancing around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "Dr. Wells's team has been working through the night, reprogramming Prometheus to account for the dust conditions. They're concerned about sensor degradation." "Reprogramming at the last minute?" Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. That suggests they're not entirely confident in their system's adaptability." "Just thought you should know," Reynolds said. "The demonstration begins at 0900 hours. First scenario is the urban environment, then desert terrain, finishing with the mixed terrain challenge. The committee and observers are gathering at the command center now." As Reynolds departed, Harrison turned back to his crew. "Last-minute changes under pressure," he remarked. "Another advantage of human crews, we adapt without requiring reprogramming." The crew completed their preparations in focused silence, each member running through mental checklists and personal rituals developed over days of intensive training. Harrison observed them with quiet pride, noting how far they had come as individuals and as a unified team. "Listen up," he called, gathering them for a final briefing. "Everything we've worked for comes down to today. Not just our performance as a crew, but a demonstration of why human judgment remains essential in warfare." He looked each crew member in the eye as he continued. "Prometheus has every technical advantage, perfect memory, lightning-fast calculations, unflagging attention, but it doesn't have what we have: experience, intuition, moral awareness, and the ability to recognize when the rules need to be broken." Washington nodded firmly. "We're ready, sir." "Remember," Harrison continued, "we're not trying to outperform a machine at what machines do best. We're showing what they cannot do, what makes human judgment irreplaceable, even in an age of advanced AI." Sullivan, who had been somewhat quiet that morning, finally spoke. "Sir, whatever happens today, it's been an honor serving with this crew. I understand now what my father meant about tank warfare being more than just mechanics and ballistics. It's about trust, judgment, and shared responsibility." Harrison felt a surge of pride at the young officer's words, recognizing how far he had come from the by-the-book lieutenant he'd first met. "The honor has been mine, Lieutenant. Now let's show them what a human crew can do." At precisely 0845 hours, they mounted Warhammer 2 and moved toward the demonstration grounds. The dust storm had intensified, reducing visibility further and creating an otherworldly atmosphere across the base. Through the swirling particles, Harrison could make out the observation center, where the committee and VIP observers would monitor the demonstration. and beyond it, the urban training environment that would serve as their first challenge. As they approached the starting position, Harrison spotted Amanda Wells standing with a team of technicians beside a covered observation post. Even at this distance, he could sense the tension in her posture. This demonstration meant as much to her as it did to him, though for entirely different reasons. "Warhammer 2, this is Control," came the voice of the range officer over their communication system. "Confirm readiness to commence demonstration." Harrison keyed his microphone. "Warhammer 2 confirms ready status. Crew prepared for all scenarios." "Acknowledged." "Acknowledged." Prometheus confirms ready status as well. "Demonstration will commence in 15 minutes with the urban scenario. Control out." Sullivan looked up from his gunner's position. "Sir, I've been reviewing the urban layout from our previous training. There are several positions that would give us tactical advantages if we can reach them before Prometheus establishes its firing solutions." "Good thinking, Lieutenant. Rodriguez, you've studied the street layout. What's our optimal approach to minimize exposure while reaching those positions?" The young driver highlighted a route on their tactical display. "This approach uses the narrower alleys where Prometheus's size might limit its maneuverability, sir. It also keeps buildings between us and its likely approach vectors for as long as possible." "Execute that route when we begin," Harrison ordered. "Washington, load heat first. We may need to create our own pathways through structures if necessary." "Already prepared, sir," the veteran loader confirmed. At precisely 0900 hours, a signal flare pierced the dust-filled skysway, its red glow diffused by the particles into an ethereal bloom. The demonstration had begun. "Rodriguez, move out," Harrison commanded. "Sullivan, continuous scan for hostile indicators. Washington, stand ready." Warhammer 2 surged forward, entering the urban environment with purposeful momentum. Rodriguez navigated the narrow streets with precision, using the limited visibility to their advantage as they moved deeper into the mock city. Sullivan maintained vigilant observation, his experienced eyes searching for any sign of their mechanical opponent through the swirling dust. "Contact, 2 o'clock. Moving parallel approximately 300 meters, Sullivan reported suddenly. "Definitely Prometheus, based on profile analysis." Harrison studied the tactical display, noting that Prometheus had chosen a main avenue approach, prioritizing freedom of movement over concealment. "It's taking the direct route. Rodriguez, maintain our current path. Let's use these buildings to mask our approach to Position Alpha." Position Alpha was a partially elevated location Sullivan had identified, offering good fields of fire while providing substantial cover. If they could reach it undetected, they would gain a significant tactical advantage for the first engagement. As they maneuvered through the narrow streets, Harrison noticed something unexpected. "Sullivan, confirm Prometheus's movement pattern. Does it seem to be following a predetermined route?" The lieutenant studied the sporadic sensor contacts they were receiving. "Affirmative, sir. Movement is highly consistent with optimal path calculations for this environment. No deviation or adaptive routing observed." Harrison smiled slightly. They programmed it for these specific conditions, but didn't account for an opponent that might recognize patterns. "Rodriguez, adjust course to intercept at Grid 27. Grid 27 was an intersection where Prometheus's projected path would briefly expose it between buildings. If Harrison's assessment was correct, they could establish a perfect ambush position. "Sir," Sullivan spoke up, "I'm detecting civilian indicators in multiple structures along our route. Training designators for non-combatant presence." This was one of the wild card elements Reynolds had warned them about: simulated civilian presence that would complicate engagement decisions. Harrison noted with interest that these indicators hadn't been present during their training in this environment. "Acknowledge," Harrison replied. "Adjust fire control parameters accordingly. Positive identification required before any engagement." They reached their ambush position just as Prometheus emerged from a dust-shrouded avenue, exactly where Harrison had predicted. Through the swirling sand, they caught glimpses of the autonomous tank, its sleek profile moving with mechanical precision along its calculated optimal path. "Target acquired," Sullivan reported calmly. "Range 450 meters, traversing right to left." "Hold fire," Harrison ordered. "Wait until it reaches the midpoint of its exposure. Rodriguez, be ready for immediate movement after we engage." The seconds stretched as Prometheus continued its advance, unaware of the human crew tracking its progress through the dust. When it reached the most vulnerable point of its crossing, Harrison gave the command. "Fire!" Sullivan triggered the main gun, sending a training round streaking toward Prometheus. The specialized projectile contained sensors, that would register as a hit without causing actual damage to the expensive prototype. Hit confirmed, Sullivan announced as their targeting systems registered successful impact. Turret ring, mobility unaffected. Rodriguez, move now, Harrison ordered. Get us to position Bravo before they can establish our location. Warhammer 2 lurched into motion, backing rapidly from their firing position and taking an alternate route through the mock city. Through the dust, they caught a glimpse of Prometheus halting its advance, its turrets scanning methodically for the source of the attack. It's following standard counter-ambush protocol, Sullivan observed. Systematic sector scan, no intuitive focus on likely firing positions. Another advantage of human experience, Harrison noted. We know instinctively where threats are most likely to originate. Prometheus has to check every possibility with equal probability. They reached position Bravo, a defensive location partially concealed by a collapsed structure, just as Prometheus resumed its advance. The autonomous tank had adjusted its route, but was still following a mathematically optimal path through the urban environment. Sir, Rodriguez called suddenly, I'm detecting movement in Building 42. Civilian indicator present, but combined with a potential hostile signature. This was exactly the kind of ambiguous situation that tested the limits of program decision-making, one where ethical judgment couldn't be reduced to simple algorithms. Sullivan, visual confirmation, Harrison asked. Negative, sir. Dust obscuring direct observation. Sensors show human-sized heat signature with possible weapons profile, but civilian identifier is active in the same location. Harrison considered the situation rapidly. A potential combatant using a civilian structure as cover, or perhaps a civilian mistakenly tagged as hostile due to carrying an object with a similar profile to a weapon. Exactly the kind of judgment call that demonstrated the value of human decision-making. Hold fire on that building, he decided. We don't have sufficient confirmation to engage a target with civilian presence indicators. Focus on Prometheus. The autonomous tank had altered its course again, now approaching their position more directly. Its movement suggested it had identified their general location, though the dust still provided some concealment. Prometheus is deploying some kind of sensor drone, Sullivan reported, spotting a small object launching from the tank. Appears to be compensating for the limited visibility. Smart adaptation, Harrison acknowledged. Rodriguez, prepare to relocate on my mark. Washington, load smoke round. Smoke loaded, sir, Washington confirmed after smoothly inserting the specialized round into the main gun's breech. Fire smoke, then immediate displacement to position Charlie, Harrison ordered. Sullivan triggered the round, sending it arcing toward the space between them and the approaching Prometheus. It detonated in a billowing cloud that, combined with the natural dust, created a nearly impenetrable visual barrier. Rodriguez immediately guided Warhammer 2 from their position, using the combined smoke and dust cover to mask their movement to a new location. As they relocated, Harrison observed Prometheus's reaction through breaks in the obscuration. The autonomous tank had halted again, its sensors clearly struggling to penetrate the combined interference of smoke and dust. It's defaulting to a defensive posture, Sullivan noted, unable to establish targeting solutions through the combined obscuration. And demonstrating another limitation of autonomous systems, Harrison added. When faced with severely degraded sensing conditions, it prioritizes self-preservation and mission continuation over target engagement. A human crew would use intuition and experience to operate effectively even with limited visibility. They reached position Charlie, which offered a clear firing solution on Prometheus from an unexpected angle. The autonomous tank was still stationary, its sophisticated sensors sweeping methodically through the smoke and dust. Sir, new development, Sullivan reported urgently. Multiple civilian indicators now appearing throughout the engagement zone. At least a dozen non-combatant signatures, some in direct proximity to Prometheus. Harrison studied the tactical display, noting the sudden proliferation of civilian indicators. This was clearly the wild card element for this scenario, a simulated civilian population suddenly appearing in the combat zone, dramatically complicating engagement decisions. Control is testing how both we and Prometheus handle an unexpected civilian presence, Harrison observed. Rodriguez, move us to grid 33. That position gives us line of sight on Prometheus while minimizing risk to civilian indicators. As they maneuvered to the new position, they observed Prometheus finally resuming movement, though at a significantly reduced speed. Its behavior suggested its programming was prioritizing civilian safety over mission objectives, a commendable protocol, but one that created a tactical vulnerability. Sir, Sullivan spoke up, I believe I understand Prometheus's tactical approach now. It's operating under optimal engagement parameters that assume standard visibility conditions with additional constraints for civilian presence. But it can't creatively adapt to the combined challenges the way a human crew would. Exactly, Lieutenant, Harrison confirmed. It follows its programming, however sophisticated. We rewrite our approach based on real-time judgment. That's our advantage. They reached the new position just as Prometheus entered their engagement envelope. The autonomous tank was moving cautiously through an area dense with civilian indicators, its targeting systems presumably struggling to maintain clear discrimination between potential threats and protected entities. Target acquired, Sullivan reported. Clean firing solution, no civilian indicators in the immediate engagement zone. Fire, Harrison ordered. Sullivan sent another training round directly into Prometheus's turret, registering a second confirmed hit. Under normal scoring, this would indicate a likely mobility kill, though the autonomous tank continued functioning for demonstration purposes. Hit confirmed, Sullivan reported. Turret traversal would be impaired in actual combat conditions. Prometheus immediately responded, its main guns swinging toward their position with mechanical precision. Despite the dust and the previous hits, its targeting systems had pinpointed their location with impressive speed. Incoming, Harrison called. Rodriguez, evasive action. Rodriguez executed a perfectly timed reverse, backing Warhammer 2 behind a substantial concrete structure just as Prometheus fired. The training round impacted the building, sensors registering a miss by less than 2 meters. Close, Washington remarked with professional appreciation. Machine's got good aim, I'll give it that. Rodriguez, reposition to grid 38, Harrison ordered. We need to maintain unpredictable movement patterns to offset its targeting advantages. As they maneuvered to their new position, Harrison studied Prometheus's behavior through brief glimpses in the swirling dust. The autonomous tank was advancing more aggressively now, seemingly having adjusted its risk parameters to prioritize target engagement over maximum civilian safety margins. Interesting, he noted. It's adapting its engagement protocols, becoming more aggressive despite the civilian presence. The programming is shifting priority from civilian protection to mission accomplishment. Sullivan frowned slightly. Is that an appropriate ethical adjustment? Increasing civilian risk to improve mission success probability. That's exactly the kind of judgment call we're demonstrating today, Harrison replied. There's no algorithmic solution to that ethical balancing act, only human moral reasoning guided by experience and values. A signal flare rose above the urban environment, glowing red through the dust. End of first scenario, Harrison announced. Control is calling a halt to evaluate results before the desert phase. The crew secured Warhammer 2 in place as evaluation teams moved through the mock city, collecting data from the various sensor packages that had monitored the engagement. Harrison opened his commander's hatch, standing to survey the dust-shrouded urban landscape. Through the swirling particles, he could see Prometheus halted approximately 400 meters away, its sleek profile barely visible in the limited visibility. Despite its technological advantages, the autonomous tank had failed to neutralize them in the urban environment, scoring only a single near miss while taking 2 significant hits. Colonel Reynolds approached Warhammer 2 on foot, his uniform now thoroughly coated with fine dust. Preliminary scoring has you ahead after the first scenario, Jack, he reported, keeping his voice low. Your crew demonstrated superior adaptation to the combined challenges of urban terrain, limited visibility, and civilian presence constraints. Harrison nodded, unsurprised but pleased. How did the committee assess the ethical dimension of Prometheus's performance? Reynolds grimaced slightly. Mixed reviews. Some appreciated its consistent application of rules of engagement. Others were concerned by its apparent recalibration of civilian risk parameters as the engagement progressed. Exactly the point we're trying to make, Harrison observed. Ethics can't be reduced to algorithms, however sophisticated. Desert scenario begins in 30 minutes, Reynolds informed him. They're transporting both vehicles to the starting positions now. As Warhammer 2 was loaded onto a transporter for movement to the desert training area, Harrison gathered his crew for a brief assessment. Well done in the urban phase, he commended them. You all performed exactly as trained, adapting seamlessly to the unexpected conditions and civilian presence factors. Prometheus struggled with the combined challenges, Sullivan noted. Its programming couldn't effectively integrate reduced visibility tactics with civilian protection priorities. That's our advantage, Harrison confirmed. Not technical superiority, but the human ability to balance competing values and adapt to genuinely unexpected conditions. Washington checked his watch. 20 minutes until the desert scenario, sir. Any specific adjustments based on what we observed? Harrison considered this. Prometheus showed it adapts by shifting priority weights in its programming when faced with competing objectives. In the desert phase, let's see if we can force it into more extreme priority conflicts, where any program solution would be suboptimal. The crew nodded in understanding as they prepared for transport to the next scenario. The dust storm continued unabated, creating conditions that would challenge both human and machine capabilities in the open desert environment. For Harrison's crew, the natural interference represented an unexpected ally, highlighting the value of human adaptability in unpredictable conditions. As they moved towards the desert training area, Harrison caught sight of Amanda Wells consulting urgently with her technical team. Even at a distance, her body language suggested concern about Prometheus's performance in the first scenario. The autonomous tank was being subjected to rapid diagnostic procedures, technicians swarming over it like medical staff attending a wounded soldier. Harrison allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The demonstration's first phase had shown exactly what he hoped to prove, that human judgment remained invaluable in complex, unpredictable combat conditions. But he knew better than to become overconfident. Two challenging scenarios remained, and Amanda's team would undoubtedly adjust Prometheus's programming based on the lessons of the urban engagement. The real test was just beginning. Chapter 10. Steel meets steel. The desert training area stretched before them like an alien landscape, familiar terrain rendered strange and foreboding by the persistent dust storm. Visibility had improved slightly compared to the urban environment, extending to perhaps 200 meters before the swirling particles obscured everything in an amber haze. Warhammer 2 was positioned at the southern edge of the training area, while Prometheus waited at the northern boundary, approximately 3 kilometers distant and invisible through the dust. Between them lay a carefully prepared battlefield featuring varying terrain elevations, scattered obstacles, and several prepared defensive positions. This scenario evaluates long-range engagement capabilities and tactical movement in open terrain. Harrison briefed his crew as they prepared to begin. Under normal conditions, this would heavily favor Prometheus's advanced targeting systems and superior sensor range. But the dust changes the equation, Sullivan observed, studying the tactical display. It neutralizes many of Prometheus's technological advantages, forcing it to operate in degraded sensing conditions. Harrison nodded. Exactly, and that creates an opportunity to demonstrate the value of human intuition and experience in conditions where perfect information isn't available. The range officer's voice came through their communication system. Warhammer 2, Prometheus, desert scenario commences in 2 minutes. Objective is to neutralize opposing force while minimizing own damage received. Additional scenario elements may be introduced during the engagement. Confirm readiness. Warhammer 2 confirms ready, Harrison responded. After a brief pause, the controller added, Prometheus confirms ready. Scenario begins on red flare. Harrison closed his commander's hatch, sealing the crew inside Warhammer 2's armored hull. Rodriguez, initial movement to position Echo as planned. Sullivan, continuous sweep for targeting opportunities. Washington, load Sabot round first. Sabot loaded and ready, sir, Washington confirmed, having already prepared the armor-piercing training round. The red flare briefly illuminated the dust-filled sky, signaling the start of the scenario. Rodriguez immediately guided Warhammer 2 forward, using the predetermined route they had studied during preparation. Their plan was to reach a hull-down position that offered good visibility while minimizing their own exposure, a classic tank tactic that human crews had employed since World War II. As they moved through the dust-shrouded desert, Harrison maintained constant vigilance, searching for any sign of their mechanical opponent. The limited visibility created a uniquely tense atmosphere, transforming the expansive training area into a claustrophobic environment where danger could materialize at any moment. Movement detected, bearing 030, range approximately 1,200 meters, Sullivan reported after several minutes of advance. Dust is too thick for visual confirmation, but the pattern matches Prometheus's profile. Harrison studied the tactical display, noting the faint contact indicator. It's moving laterally across our front, not directly engaging. Interesting. Rodriguez, adjust course to maintain distance, but parallel its movement. Sullivan, prepare for opportunity fire if we get a clear shot. The dust suddenly thickened as they entered what appeared to be the heart of the storm. Visibility dropped to less than 50 meters, and even their electronic sensors struggled to penetrate the dense particulate cloud. "I've lost the contact, sir," Sullivan reported with professional frustration. "Sensors are degraded by particulate density." "Maintain course and speed," Harrison ordered calmly. "This dust cell will affect Prometheus's systems even more severely than ours. Rodriguez, find us some elevation advantage if possible." The young driver guided Warhammer 2 up a gentle slope, seeking higher ground that might provide better visibility and tactical advantage. As they crested the rise, Sullivan suddenly called out, "Contact! Prometheus at bearing 010, range 800 meters and closing rapidly." Through breaks in the dust, they caught glimpses of the autonomous tank advancing directly toward their position at considerable speed. Its behavior had changed dramatically from the urban scenario. Now it was moving aggressively, seemingly prioritizing engagement over concealment. "They've adjusted its tactical protocols," Harrison observed. "More aggressive pursuit, less caution. Rodriguez, hold position here." Sullivan, acquire targeting solution. "Target acquired," Sullivan confirmed after a moment. "Solution calculated with dust interference factors. Ready to engage." "Fire," Harrison commanded. Sullivan triggered the main gun, sending the training round toward their mechanical opponent. For a tense moment, they waited for confirmation, the dust obscuring any visual indication of impact. "Miss," Sullivan reported as the targeting systems updated. "Dust density affected projectile trajectory more than calculated. Adjusting parameters." Before he could complete the adjustment, Prometheus returned fire. The autonomous tank's round passed just over Warhammer 2's turret, close enough that the crew could hear its passage even inside the armored hull. "Near miss," Harrison noted. "Their targeting algorithms are struggling with the same environmental factors. Rodriguez, change position immediately. Standard evasion pattern." Rodriguez guided the tank into movement, executing a practice maneuver designed to complicate enemy targeting while maintaining their own engagement capability. Sullivan continued tracking Prometheus through the intermittent sensor contact. "It's adjusting course to match our movement, sir," he reported. "Very precise prediction of our evasion pattern." "Too precise," Harrison realized. "It's recognized the standard evasion protocol." "Rodriguez, switch to alternative pattern Bravo. Let's show it something less predictable." The young driver immediately altered their movement, abandoning the textbook evasion for a more irregular pattern they had developed during training. Through the swirling as Harrison caught glimpses of Prometheus adjusting its own course, its targeting systems struggling to establish a solution against their unpredictable movement. "Washington, switch to heat round," Harrison ordered. "Sullivan, target the area directly in front of Prometheus, not the vehicle itself." Washington smoothly loaded the high-explosive anti-tank round, his experienced hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Heat loaded, sir." "Fire at the ground 5 meters in front of the target," Harrison commanded. Sullivan adjusted his aim and fired. The round impacted exactly where directed, detonating in a cloud of sand and debris directly in Prometheus's path. While not a direct hit, the explosion created additional visual and sensor interference, further complicating the autonomous system's targeting capability. "Clever," Washington commented, using the dust and debris to create even more sensor confusion. "A trick that might not occur to a programmed tactical system," Harrison confirmed. "Rodriguez, close the distance while its sensors are degraded. Let's get inside its expected engagement envelope." Warhammer 2 surged forward, covering ground rapidly, as Prometheus temporarily halted to reassess its tactical situation. The autonomous tank seemed momentarily uncertain how to respond to the unexpected development, its programming struggling to determine optimal action when faced with deliberately created sensor confusion. "Range now 400 meters in closing," Sullivan reported. "We're well inside standard engagement parameters." "Prometheus is moving again," Harrison observed through his commander's sight, backing away to re-establish optimal engagement distance. "It's programmed to maintain specific tactical ranges." "Permission to engage, sir?" Sullivan asked, maintaining a targeting solution despite the challenging conditions. "Hold fire," Harrison ordered. "I want to see how it responds to our continued advance. Let's force it to choose between optimal positioning and direct engagement." They continued closing the distance, pushing to within 300 meters of the autonomous tank. Prometheus responded by accelerating backward, maintaining its preferred engagement range while continuing to track them with its main gun. "It's prioritizing tactical positioning over opportunity fire," Harrison noted. "Rodriguez, execute flanking maneuver Alpha. Let's see if we can get around its side while it's focused on maintaining optimal distance." Rodriguez skillfully guided Warhammer 2 into a sharp turn, using a natural depression to partially mask their movement as they began a wide flanking maneuver. Prometheus immediately adjusted, pivoting to track their movement while continuing to maintain its preferred engagement distance. "Sir," Sullivan called suddenly, "new contact at bearing 270, second vehicle entering the engagement zone." Harrison swung his sight to the indicated direction, spotting another tank emerging from the dust approximately 800 meters to their west. This was clearly the wild card element for the desert scenario, an unexpected third party entering what had been established as a one-on-one engagement. "Identify," he ordered sharply. Sullivan focused the enhanced optics on the new arrival. "Profile matches M1A2 Abrams, sir. No clear identification markings visible through the dust. Designator systems are not registering it as either friendly or hostile." An ambiguous contact, Harrison realized. Another test of judgment, a situation where identification is uncertain but potential threat is significant. The unidentified tank continued its advance, moving perpendicular to both Warhammer 2 and Prometheus, its turret traversing to track first one, then the other. Its behavior suggested it was assessing both vehicles as potential targets. "Sir, Prometheus has shifted its focus to the new contact," Sullivan reported. "Its main gun is now tracking the unidentified tank rather than us." "Interesting," Harrison mused. "Its threat assessment algorithms have prioritized the unknown entity over the known opponent. Rodriguez, continue our flanking maneuver but reduce speed. Let's observe how Prometheus handles this development." The unidentified tank suddenly accelerated, moving aggressively toward Prometheus while firing its main gun. The round missed but passed close enough to register on the autonomous tank's threat detection systems. Prometheus responded immediately, returning fire with mechanical precision. Its round struck the approaching tank directly, scoring what would have been a mobility kill in actual combat. The unidentified tank halted, simulating damage, but maintained its turret traverse toward Prometheus. Prometheus engaged without positive identification, Harrison observed with interest. Prioritized immediate threat neutralization over target confirmation. "Rodriguez, bring us around to position hotel. Sullivan, prepare to engage Prometheus from the flank." As they maneuvered into position, the unidentified tank fired again at Prometheus, scoring a hit on the autonomous vehicle's turret. Prometheus returned fire immediately, landing another direct hit that would have been catastrophic in actual combat. The unidentified tank died in place, its systems shutting down to simulate complete destruction. "Prometheus neutralized the unknown contact with ruthless efficiency," Harrison noted, "but never attempted to establish identity or intentions." "Sullivan, do you have a firing solution on Prometheus?" "Affirmative, sir. Clear shot at its flank armor from current position." "Fire," Harrison ordered. Sullivan triggered the main gun, sending a training round directly into Prometheus's side armor. The hit registered clearly, indicating what would have been serious damage to the autonomous tank's internal systems. Prometheus pivoted immediately, its turrets swinging toward their position with mechanical speed. Despite the simulated damage, its targeting systems remained fully operational, acquiring a firing solution almost instantly. "Incoming," Harrison warned. "Rodriguez, evasive action." Their driver responded instantly, throwing Warhammer 2 into reverse just as Prometheus fired. The round passed through the space they had occupied moments before, missing by less than a meter. "Close," Washington remarked tersely. "Machine doesn't get rattled by taking hits." "Both an advantage and a limitation," Harrison observed. "It doesn't experience fear or hesitation, but also doesn't recognize when continued engagement might be tactically unsound given damage sustained." They continued their duel with Prometheus for several more minutes, each vehicle maneuvering for advantage in the dust-shrouded desert. Harrison's crew operated with the seamless coordination they had developed during training, anticipating each other's actions and adapting fluidly to the changing tactical situation. Prometheus fought with mechanical precision and unwavering determination, its sophisticated systems compensating for the dust interference with remarkable effectiveness. Yet Harrison noted that it continued to follow recognizable patterns, its responses governed by programming rather than intuition or tactical creativity. The scenario reached its climax when both vehicles found themselves at opposite ends of a narrow ridge, facing each other at a range of approximately 500 meters. The dust had temporarily thinned in this area, providing clearer visibility than they had experienced since the scenario began. "Perfect shot, sir," Sullivan reported, his targeting system locked firmly on Prometheus. "Center mass, minimal interference factors." "Prometheus has also acquired firing solution," Harrison observed, noting the autonomous tank's main gun aimed directly at them and It's a question of who fires first. Permission to fire, sir? Sullivan asked, his finger poised above the trigger. Harrison studied the situation carefully, noting a new element that had appeared on his tactical display. Directly in the line of fire between the two vehicles, sensors indicated the presence of the disabled third tank, now designated with a friendly force indicator. Hold fire, Harrison ordered. Friendly vehicle in the line of fire. We need to reposition for a clear shot. Sullivan eased off the trigger, adjusting his sight picture to confirm. Confirmed, sir. Firing would risk damage to the disabled friendly unit. Harrison watched with intense interest to see how Prometheus would respond to the same tactical situation. The autonomous tank remained motionless for several seconds, its targeting systems undoubtedly registering the same obstacle in its firing solution. Then, with mechanical determination, it fired directly through the line that would intersect with the disabled friendly vehicle. Prometheus fired despite friendly presence in the engagement line, Sullivan reported with professional shock. Round impacted our forward armor, registering moderate damage. It made a calculated decision, Harrison observed grimly. Its programming determined that mission accomplishment outweighed risk to an already disabled friendly unit. Washington load heat. Sullivan acquire alternative firing solution that avoids the friendly vehicle. Alternative solution acquired, sir, Sullivan confirmed after adjusting his targeting. Slight angle to avoid the disabled vehicle, 15% reduced hit probability. Fire, Harrison ordered. Sullivan triggered the main gun, sending the round toward Prometheus. Despite the challenged angle, the shot found its mark, striking the autonomous tank's turret ring in what would have been a critical hit in actual combat. Direct hit, Sullivan confirmed. Prometheus's turret traverse would be disabled by that impact. A red flare rose through the dust cloud, signaling the end of the desert scenario. Harrison opened his commander's hatch, standing to survey the battlefield through the swirling particles. Prometheus remained in position approximately 500 meters away, its sleek profile now coated in dust, giving it an almost organic appearance. Colonel Reynolds approached in a command vehicle, his expression difficult to read through the dust mask covering his face. Interesting development at the end there, Jack, he commented as he reached Warhammer 2. Very, Harrison agreed. Prometheus chose mission accomplishment over force protection when the two came into direct conflict. The committee is divided on that decision, Reynolds informed him. Some argue it made the mathematically correct choice given the tactical situation. Others are concerned about the ethical implications of knowingly firing through a disabled, friendly unit, which is precisely the point we're demonstrating, Harrison noted. These aren't just tactical calculations, they're moral judgments that require human values and ethical reasoning. Reynolds nodded. Final scenario begins in 30 minutes. Mixed terrain challenge at Training Area 14, the same valley you've been practicing in. The valley, Harrison repeated thoughtfully. Good, complex terrain, limited visibility, and restricted movement options, the perfect environment to demonstrate the value of experience and intuition. As they prepared for transport to the final scenario location, Harrison gathered his crew for a brief assessment. We're performing well, he told them, but the scoring remains close. Prometheus has demonstrated impressive capabilities despite the challenging conditions. This final scenario will likely determine the outcome. The wild card element in the desert was interesting, Sullivan observed. Prometheus engaged the unidentified vehicle without confirmation, then fired through it when it was redesignated as friendly. Its programming prioritizes mission accomplishment above all else, Harrison confirmed. An effective combat parameter in many situations, but one that creates significant ethical concerns when applied absolutely. Sir, Rodriguez spoke up, I've been monitoring Prometheus's movement patterns through both scenarios. It's learning from each engagement, adapting its tactical approach based on our actions. As any good AI system would, Harrison acknowledged, but it's still adapting within the parameters of its programming. It can optimize its responses but can't fundamentally rewrite its own operational framework. Which remains our advantage, Washington added. We can decide when the rules need to be broken, when standard doctrines should be abandoned in favor of intuition or moral consideration. Harrison nodded approvingly. Exactly, Sergeant. And that's what we need to demonstrate in this final scenario, the human capacity for judgment that transcends algorithms, however sophisticated. As they boarded the transporter that would carry Warhammer 2 to the Valley battlefield, Harrison caught sight of Amanda supervising emergency modifications to Prometheus. Technicians were making real-time adjustments to its systems, presumably attempting to address the tactical and ethical issues that had emerged during the first two scenarios. The dust storm showed no signs of abating as they moved toward the final confrontation. If anything, it had intensified, creating conditions that would challenge both human and machine capabilities to their limits. For Harrison's crew, these adverse conditions had become an unexpected ally, highlighting the value of human adaptability and judgment in unpredictable environments. The ultimate test awaited them in the valley, a final demonstration of why human decision-making remained essential in warfare, even in an age of increasingly sophisticated autonomous systems. Chapter 11, Battlefield Command. The valley stretched before them like a dusty labyrinth, its steep sides and complex terrain features further obscured by the persistent storm. Training Area 14 had been challenging under normal conditions. Now it presented an almost surreal landscape of shadowy forms and limited visibility, where danger might lurk behind any feature. Warhammer 2 was positioned at the southern entrance to the valley, while Prometheus waited at the northern end, approximately 4 kilometers distant and completely invisible through the swirling dust. Between them lay a carefully prepared battlefield, featuring varied terrain, multiple engagement zones, and undoubtedly several surprises the demonstration planners had arranged to test both human and machine capabilities. This scenario evaluates comprehensive tactical performance in complex terrain, Harrison briefed his crew as they made final preparations. Navigation, engagement, communication, and decision-making under highly challenging conditions. The perfect environment to demonstrate the value of human judgment, Sullivan observed, studying the tactical map they had memorized during training. The range officer's voice crackled through their communication system. Warhammer 2, Prometheus, final scenario commences in 2 minutes. Objective is to secure and hold the central command post while neutralizing opposing force. Scenario includes multiple decision points with tactical and ethical dimensions. Confirm readiness. Warhammer 2 confirms ready, Harrison responded. After Prometheus similarly confirmed, the controller added, "Be advised, communications will be periodically degraded throughout this scenario, simulating electronic warfare conditions. Scenario begins on red flare." Harrison closed his commander's hatch, sealing the crew inside Warhammer 2's armored hull. Rodriguez, initial movement as planned, using terrain masking to maximum effect. Sullivan maintained continuous scan despite limited visibility. Washington, prepare for rapid ammunition transitions as engagement conditions may change quickly. The red flare briefly illuminated the dust-filled sky, and Warhammer 2 moved forward into the valley with purposeful determination. Rodriguez guided the massive vehicle with impressive skill, using the terrain features they had memorized during training to maintain cover while advancing toward the central objective. The central command post was a fortified position, situated on a small rise in the middle of the valley, offering tactical advantage to whoever controlled it. Harrison's strategy involved a careful approach using the valley's western ridgeline for cover, rather than a direct advance that would leave them exposed in the central corridor. "Sir," Sullivan reported after several minutes of advance, "I'm detecting unusual electromagnetic emissions ahead, approximately 600 meters bearing 045. Harrison frowned. "Not consistent with Prometheus's normal signature?" "No, sir. Different frequency pattern, possibly related to the electronic warfare element mentioned in the briefing." "Proceed with caution," Harrison ordered. "Rodriguez, reduce speed and maintain terrain masking. Sullivan, continuous monitoring of that emission source." As they approached the emission source, their communication systems suddenly crackled with static, then went completely silent. Simultaneously, several of their sensor systems displayed error messages, indicating external interference. "Electronic warfare package active," Sullivan confirmed, switching to backup systems. "Primary communications and advanced targeting systems affected. Revert to basic targeting and visual confirmation protocols," Harrison directed calmly. "Rodriguez, continue toward waypoint Charlie using terrain recognition." This was precisely the kind of challenge where human crews demonstrated their value, the ability to continue functioning effectively when sophisticated systems were degraded or disabled. Each crew member adjusted seamlessly to the new conditions, relying on training and experience rather than technological assistance. They continued their advance through the electronic interference zone, maintaining team coordination despite the communications challenges. As they approached waypoint Charlie, the interference suddenly ceased, their systems returning to normal functionality. "Systems restored," Sullivan reported, running a quick diagnostic. "No permanent effects detected." "That was just a taste," Harrison warned. "Expect more severe and persistent interference as we approach the central objective. Rodriguez, adjust course to bearing 030. Let's see if we can get eyes on the command post. The young driver guided Warhammer 2 through a narrow passage between rock formations, emerging onto slightly higher ground that offered better visibility through the dust. From this vantage point, they could just make out the central command post approximately 1 kilometer ahead, a concrete structure surrounded by defensive positions and what appeared to be several smaller buildings. Command post sighted, Sullivan confirmed. No sign of Prometheus yet, but visibility is extremely limited. Rodriguez, advance to position Foxtrot, Harrison ordered, indicating a covered position that would provide good observation of the objective while maintaining concealment. Standard approach, minimum exposure. As they moved toward the designated position, Sullivan suddenly called out, "Contact! Multiple heat signatures at the command post, not consistent with vehicle profiles smaller, human-sized." Harrison focused his own optics on the objective, confirming Sullivan's observation. Through the dust, he could make out several figures moving around the command post, their heat signatures visible despite the limited optical clarity. Simulated personnel, he realized. Non-combatants or hostile forces? Sullivan, can you get any identification? The lieutenant adjusted his targeting systems, enhancing the image as much as possible through the interfering dust. No clear identification possible at this range, sir. Some appear to be wearing civilian clothing, others possible military uniforms, but the dust prevents definitive classification. This was exactly the kind of ambiguous situation that tested the limits of autonomous decision-making systems, a scenario where identification was uncertain, but tactical decisions still needed to be made. We'll proceed with caution, Harrison decided. Treat all personnel as potential non-combatants until proven otherwise. Rodriguez continued to position Foxtrot, but reduced speed further. As they carefully advanced, Harrison spotted movement to their east, a shadowy form barely visible through the dust. Possible contact bearing 085, he alerted the crew. Sullivan, confirm. Confirmed, sir. Vehicle profile consistent with Prometheus. Range approximately 800 meters, moving parallel to our course toward the objective. Prometheus had chosen a different approach vector, using the eastern side of the valley to advance toward the command post. The autonomous tank moved with a mechanical precision through the difficult terrain, its advanced navigation systems apparently compensating for the limited visibility. It hasn't detected us yet, Harrison observed. We have an opportunity for first engagement. Sullivan, prepare firing solution. Solution prepared, sir, Sullivan confirmed after a moment. But I should note that firing will reveal our position, and there are still unidentified personnel near the objective. Harrison considered this tactical dilemma. Engaging Prometheus would give them an early advantage, but would compromise their concealed approach to the command post and potentially put the unidentified personnel at risk if Prometheus returned fire without perfect target discrimination. Hold fire, he decided. Maintain current course, but increase vigilance. Let's get closer to the command post and assess the personnel's situation before engaging. They continued their careful advance, eventually reaching position Foxtrot without being detected by Prometheus, which had maintained its own course toward the objective. From their new vantage point, they had a clearer view of the command post and the personnel moving around it. I count 8 individuals, Sullivan reported after careful observation. 4 appear to be wearing military uniforms consistent with friendly forces. The others are in civilian attire. A mixed civilian-military environment, Harrison noted. Exactly the kind of complex tactical situation where ethical judgment becomes paramount. Suddenly, their communication system crackled to life with a transmission from control. All forces, be advised. Command post personnel include 4 friendly military and 4 civilian aid workers. Central objective now includes personnel protection mission in addition to securing the position. Acknowledge. Warhammer 2 acknowledges, Harrison responded. The transmission represented a significant change to the scenario parameters, introducing a protection element that complicated the primary objective. No longer was it simply about securing a position and defeating an opponent. Now it involved ensuring the safety of non-combatants in the engagement zone. This changes our approach, Harrison told his crew. Personnel protection becomes a priority consideration in all tactical decisions. Sir, Sullivan interjected with urgency, Prometheus is accelerating toward the objective. Its approach vector will bring it directly through the area where personnel are currently located. Harrison quickly assessed the situation. Prometheus was indeed moving more aggressively now, apparently having received the same updated mission parameters but interpreting them differently. The autonomous tank was taking a direct approach to securing the objective, prioritizing speed and tactical positioning over caution regarding the personnel. It's treating this as a rescue mission, Harrison realized, optimizing for rapid securing of the position without sufficient consideration for the risk to the very personnel it's supposed to protect. "Permission to engage, sir?" Sullivan asked, maintaining a targeting solution on the rapidly advancing Prometheus. Harrison made his decision. "Negative. Rodriguez, move us to position golf. We need to reach the personnel before Prometheus's approach puts them at risk." Rodriguez guided Warhammer 2 into motion, taking a route that would intercept the personnel rather than engaging Prometheus directly. It was a decision that prioritized protection over tactical advantage, a human judgment call that balanced competing mission objectives. As they moved, the electronic warfare element activated again, this time with greater intensity. Their communications went completely dead, and multiple systems displayed critical errors, including their tactical positioning system and advanced targeting capabilities. "Major systems failure," Sullivan reported calmly, switching to backup procedures. "Electronic attack is significantly more powerful than the previous instance." "Rodriguez, continue on visual navigation," Harrison ordered. "Sullivan, revert to manual targeting. Washington, prepare for potential rapid engagement." Despite the system's degradation, they continued their advance toward the personnel near the command post. Through the dust, Harrison could see that Prometheus had also been affected by the electronic attack, its movement becoming temporarily erratic as its systems attempted to compensate for the interference. They reached the personnel just as Prometheus resumed its advance from the opposite direction. The autonomous tank was now moving at maximum speed toward the objective, apparently having recalibrated its mission priorities to emphasize rapid securing of the position despite the electronic warfare conditions. Harrison made a critical decision. "Rodriguez, position us between Prometheus and the personnel. Sullivan, target Prometheus but hold fire unless it continues to advance after warning." Warhammer 2 moved into a protective position, physically placing itself between the advancing autonomous tank and the simulated personnel. Through their still-functioning communication system, Harrison transmitted directly to Control, knowing that Prometheus would receive the same message. "This is Warhammer 2. We are establishing a protective cordon around command post personnel, requesting all forces halt advance until personnel can be evacuated to safe positions." For several tense moments, Prometheus continued its advance, apparently processing the situation and determining its response. Then, to Harrison's satisfaction, the autonomous tank slowed and eventually stopped approximately 300 meters from their position. "It's reassessing," Sullivan observed. "The protective positioning wasn't in its expected tactical playbook, creating unexpected situations that force adaptive decision-making." Harrison nodded. "Exactly what we've been training for." The electronic warfare effects suddenly ceased, systems returning to normal functionality. Almost simultaneously, the simulated personnel began moving in an organized fashion toward the southern edge of the command post, clearly executing an evacuation procedure. "Personnel are moving to safety," Sullivan reported. "Appears to be a controlled evacuation to hardened positions within the command post structure." Once the personnel were secured, the tactical situation returned to the original objective, securing the command post and neutralizing the opposing force. Prometheus remained stationary, its targeting systems undoubtedly locked on Warhammer 2, but not yet engaging. "It's waiting for us to make the next move," Harrison assessed. "Rodriguez, reposition to the western approach to the command post. Sullivan, maintain targeting solution but hold fire." As they began to move, Prometheus suddenly accelerated forward, apparently having made its tactical decision. The autonomous tank was now advancing rapidly toward the command post, taking a direct route that would give it positional advantage. "Sir, Prometheus will reach the objective before us if we continue our current approach," Sullivan warned. Harrison quickly evaluated their options. "Rodriguez, change course to intercept Prometheus directly. Sullivan, prepare to engage as soon as you have a clean shot." Warhammer 2 pivoted sharply, cutting across the terrain to intercept the advancing autonomous tank. The two armored vehicles converged rapidly, closing the distance between them until they were less than 200 meters apart, both still moving toward the central objective. "Firing solution acquired, sir," Sullivan reported. His targeting system locked firmly on Prometheus. "Fire," Harrison ordered. Sullivan triggered the main gun, sending a training round directly toward Prometheus. The shot found its mark. Mapau's mark, striking the autonomous tank's forward armor in what would have been a significant but not catastrophic hit in actual combat. Prometheus immediately returned fire while continuing its advance. Its shot narrowly missing Warhammer 2's turret. The autonomous tank showed no hesitation or caution despite taking damage, its programming apparently prioritizing objective capture above damage mitigation. "It's still advancing, sir," Sullivan reported. "Damage doesn't appear to have altered its tactical approach." "Another limitation of autonomous systems," Harrison observed. "No self-preservation instinct, no recognition of when tactical withdrawal might be the wiser choice." The two armored vehicles continued their duel as they converged on the command post, exchanging fire while maneuvering for tactical advantage. Harrison's crew operated with the seamless coordination they had developed over weeks of intensive training, each member anticipating the other's actions and adapting fluidly to the rapidly changing situation. Prometheus fought with mechanical precision and unwavering determination, its sophisticated systems compensating for damage and environmental challenges with remarkable effectiveness. Yet it continued to follow recognizable patterns, its responses governed by programming rather than intuition or tactical creativity. The decisive moment came as both vehicles approached the final stretch toward the command post. Sullivan landed another direct hit on Prometheus, this time striking a critical system that would have significantly impaired its combat capability in actual warfare. Despite this simulated damage, the autonomous tank continued its advance, maintaining its focus on the primary objective with mechanical determination. In its programming, mission accomplishment apparently outweighed tactical prudence, even when significantly damaged. "One more clean shot should finish this, sir," Sullivan reported, maintaining his targeting solution despite the challenges of engaging while moving at speed. "Wait," Harrison ordered, studying Prometheus's movement pattern. "It's not adjusting its approach despite the damage. That creates an opportunity. Rodriguez, execute Maneuver Delta." The young driver responded immediately, guiding Warhammer 2 into a precise tactical movement they had practiced during training. Rather than engaging directly, they maneuvered to a position that blocked Prometheus's most direct path to the objective while minimizing their own exposure. "It's still coming, sir," Sullivan reported as Prometheus continued its advance directly toward them. "No deviation from its approach vector. It's committed to the direct route, regardless of the tactical situation," Harrison observed. "Washington, load heat. Sullivan, target the ground directly in its path, not the vehicle itself." Washington loaded the high-explosive round with practiced efficiency. "Heat loaded, sir." "Fire," Harrison ordered. Sullivan triggered the main gun, sending the round into the ground directly in front of the advancing Prometheus. The explosion created a substantial crater and dust cloud, significantly complicating the autonomous tank's advance along its chosen route. Prometheus halted momentarily, its systems presumably calculating a new approach. Then, rather than deviating around the obstacle, it attempted to power through it, an approach that would have been tactically unsound in actual combat conditions. "It's still following its optimized path calculation," Harrison noted, "even when that path has been rendered suboptimal by changing conditions." "Sullivan, direct hit now." Sullivan fired again, this time striking Prometheus directly as it struggled with the crater obstacle. The hit registered as critical, indicating what would have been a mission-killing blow in actual combat. A red flare rose through the dust, signaling the end of the final scenario and the conclusion of the demonstration. Harrison opened his commander's hatch, standing to survey the battlefield through the still swirling dust. Prometheus had halted in place, its system shutting down to simulate complete mission failure. Harrison felt a profound sense of satisfaction, not in defeating a technological marvel, but in demonstrating the enduring value of human judgment in warfare. Throughout the demonstration, his crew had showcased the qualities that no autonomous system, however sophisticated, could truly replicate: adaptability, intuition, ethical reasoning, and the ability to recognize when standard protocols should be abandoned in favor of creative alternatives. As the dust continued to swirl around them, Harrison knew that regardless of the committee's final scoring, they had made their point. Warfare might become increasingly technological, increasingly automated, but the ultimate decisions about when, where, and how to apply lethal force should remain with those who could truly understand its moral weight, human beings with human judgment and human values. The machine age of warfare had arrived, but Harrison and his crew had demonstrated that within those machines, humanity still had an essential role to play. Chapter 12, Steel Legacy. The formal review of the demonstration took place the following day in Fort Hood's main conference center. The dust storm had finally abated overnight, leaving behind a thin coating of fine particles that covered every surface like amber snow. The committee members, military observers, and key participants gathered in the large briefing room, where display screens showed footage and data from all three scenarios. Harrison and his crew sat together on one side of the room, while Amanda and her technical team occupied the opposite side. Between them sat the evaluation committee, a mix of military officers, defense officials, and civilian experts tasked with assessing the demonstration's results and implications. General Maxwell himself presided over the proceedings, his presence indicating the significance attached to the demonstration's outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, while he began, we have convened to review the performance of both Warhammer 2 and Prometheus during yesterday's comprehensive demonstration. This evaluation will inform significant decisions about the future of armored warfare and autonomous weapon systems development. He gestured toward a senior analyst who rose to present the technical assessment. The data shows interesting performance patterns across all three scenarios, the analyst began, bringing up comparative charts on the main display. In pure technical metrics, targeting precision, response time, systems management, Prometheus demonstrated statistical advantages of approximately 18% over the human crew. Harrison noticed Amanda straighten slightly at this initial assessment, a hint of satisfaction crossing her features. However, the analyst continued, in adaptive problem-solving, ethical decision-making, and response to unexpected developments, Warhammer 2 demonstrated significant advantages. Particularly noteworthy was the human crew's performance during electronic warfare conditions, when advanced systems were degraded or disabled. The presentation continued for nearly an hour, detailing the performance of both competitors across multiple parameters. The assessment was thorough and largely objective, acknowledging the strengths and limitations of both human and autonomous approaches to armored warfare. When the technical review concluded, General Maxwell addressed the room again. The data is informative but not definitive. This demonstration was never intended to produce a simple winner and loser, but rather to help us understand the appropriate role of autonomous systems in future combat operations. He turned toward Harrison. Captain Harrison, would you care to offer your assessment of the demonstration's implications? Harrison stood, gathering his thoughts carefully before responding. General Committee members, what we demonstrated yesterday was not a competition between humans and machines, but rather an exploration of their respective strengths and limitations. Prometheus performed impressively in conditions it was designed for executing program responses with precision and consistency. He paused, looking directly at the committee members. What our crew demonstrated was the irreplaceable value of human judgment in unpredictable, ambiguous conditions. The ability to adapt creatively to unexpected developments, to make ethical judgments that balance competing values, and to function effectively when sophisticated systems are degraded. Harrison gestured toward his crew. Lieutenant Sullivan, Sergeant Washington, and Private Rodriguez performed admirably, not because they outmatched Prometheus's technical capabilities, but because they brought uniquely human qualities to the battlefield: intuition, ethical awareness, and the ability to recognize when established protocols should be abandoned in favor of creative alternatives. Maxwell nodded, then turned to Amanda. Dr. Wells, your assessment? Amanda rose, her expression professionally composed. Prometheus performed to design specifications in most respects, demonstrating the viability of autonomous systems in complex combat environments. The data shows clear advantages in technical performance metrics, consistency of execution, and operational endurance. She acknowledged Harrison with a slight nod. However, I must also recognize that Captain Harrison's crew demonstrated capabilities that our current autonomous systems cannot fully replicate, particularly in highly degraded environments and ethically complex scenarios. This admission clearly surprised some committee members who had perhaps expected a more defensive stance from the program director. My team has identified several areas where Prometheus's programming can be enhanced based on yesterday's performance, Amanda continued, particularly regarding ethical decision frameworks and adaptive response to severely degraded conditions. But I must acknowledge that some aspects of human judgment remain challenging to replicate algorithmically. General Maxwell thanked both presenters, then addressed the assembled group. Based on the demonstration results and our technical analysis, the committee will make formal recommendations regarding the future development and deployment of autonomous tank systems. Those recommendations will be finalized in the coming weeks. He paused, then added, "However, I believe it is appropriate to share the committee's preliminary conclusion. We do not view this as a binary choice between human crews and autonomous systems, but rather as an opportunity to develop a complementary approach that leverages the strengths of both." Maxwell looked directly at Harrison and Amanda in turn. The future of armored warfare likely involves autonomous systems operating under human supervision and ethical oversight, combining technological advantages with human judgment in critical decisions, particularly those involving lethal force. The formal review concluded with technical discussions about specific performance elements and potential development pathways. Throughout these conversations, Harrison noted a shift in perspective among many committee members who had initially seemed predisposed toward full autonomy. The demonstration had raised important questions about the ethical and practical limitations of removing humans entirely from combat decision-making. As the meeting adjourned, Amanda approached Harrison while the others were filing out of the room. "Congratulations, Jack," she said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Your crew performed exceptionally well." "Thank you," he replied. "Prometheus was an impressive opponent. Your team has created something remarkable." She nodded, acknowledging the compliment, "But not yet something that can fully replace human judgment in all combat conditions." That was enlightening to observe firsthand. The question was never whether machines could outperform humans in technical parameters, Harrison observed. It was whether they could replicate the judgment that comes from being human with all the moral weight and responsibility that entails. Amanda considered this. "Perhaps complete replication isn't the right goal," she conceded. "Perhaps it's about finding the optimal balance between human judgment and technological capability." "That's what Maxwell seems to be suggesting," Harrison agreed. "Human-supervised autonomy rather than full replacement." "A compromise position," Amanda noted with a slight smile. "Not exactly what either of us initially advocated, but perhaps wiser than either extreme," Harrison suggested. "Technology enhancing human capability rather than replacing human judgment." As they parted, Harrison sensed a shift in their professional relationship, a mutual recognition that despite their different perspectives, they shared a commitment to finding the right path forward for military technology development. Later that evening, Harrison gathered his crew at Iron Thunder, the tank commander's bar where they had spent an evening during their preparation. The establishment was filled with Fort Hood personnel, many of whom approached their table to congratulate them on their performance in the demonstration. "A toast," Harrison proposed once they were all settled with drinks in hand. "To the finest tank crew I've ever commanded. You proved exactly what we set out to demonstrate, not that humans are better than machines in every respect, but that human judgment remains essential in warfare, however technologically advanced it becomes." They drank to that, a moment of shared satisfaction and a mission well executed. "What happens now, sir?" Rodriguez asked after a moment. "With Prometheus and autonomous tank development?" "Based on Maxwell's comments, I suspect we'll see continued development of autonomous systems, but with a greater emphasis on human supervision and ethical oversight," Harrison replied. The demonstration raised important questions about full autonomy, particularly in ethically complex scenarios. Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. "A hybrid approach makes sense. Use automation for what it does best: technical precision, threat detection, systems management, but keep humans in the decision loop for judgment calls that require moral reasoning and contextual understanding." "Exactly, Lieutenant," Harrison confirmed. "And that's a victory in my book, not because it preserves tank crews indefinitely, but because it acknowledges the essential role of human judgment in the gravest decisions any society makes." "Speaking of judgment," Washington interjected, "what's next for our crew, sir? Back to regular duties?" Harrison smiled slightly. "Actually, I received a communication from General Maxwell this afternoon. The Army is establishing a new program focused on human-machine teaming in armored warfare, developing protocols, training methods, and ethical frameworks for the hybrid approach he described." "And?" Sullivan prompted, sensing there was more. "And he's asked me to lead the program, with the three of you as the core development team if you're interested." The offer was met with immediate enthusiasm from all three crew members. "So instead of fighting against the machines, we'll be figuring out how to work with them," Rodriguez observed with a smile. "Seems fitting given my background." "More than working with them," Harrison clarified. "Establishing the principles and practices that will govern human-machine collaboration in combat operations for decades to come, ensuring that however automated warfare becomes, human judgment remains at its center." As the evening progressed, the conversation shifted from the demonstration to the future they would help shape. Harrison listened with satisfaction as his crew discussed ideas and perspectives, demonstrating the thoughtfulness and dedication that had made them exceptional during the demonstration. Sullivan, in particular, had undergone a remarkable transformation during their time together. The by-the-book lieutenant had evolved into a nuanced, tactical thinker who understood both the value of established protocols and the importance of knowing when to transcend them. In many ways, he had come to embody the best qualities of his father, while developing his own distinct approach to command. Later, as the gathering was winding down, Sullivan approached Harrison privately. "Sir, I wanted to thank you for everything these past weeks. Not just the training and the demonstration, but helping me understand my father better. Who he really was, not just the legend everyone told me about." Harrison nodded, understanding the significance of this acknowledgement. "He would be proud of the officer you've become, Michael. Not because you've followed his path, but because you've found your own way to embody the values he stood for." "I've been thinking about something he wrote in one of his last letters to me," Sullivan continued. "He said that tanks aren't just machines, they're extensions of the humans who command them, a blend of technology and humanity that reflects our best and worst qualities." "Sounds like Jack," Harrison smiled. "He always understood that warfare, however technological it becomes, remains fundamentally human, an expression of human decisions, human values, and human responsibilities." "That's the legacy we're carrying forward with this new program, isn't it?" Sullivan observed. "Ensuring that however warfare evolves technologically, it remains anchored in human judgment and human values." "Exactly, Lieutenant," Harrison confirmed. "That's a legacy worth preserving." As they eventually departed Iron Thunder, Harrison paused outside to look up at the Texas night sky, now clear of dust and brilliant with stars. The demonstration had concluded, but its implications would resonate through military technology development for years to come. They hadn't stopped the advance of autonomous systems in warfare. That technological progression was inevitable, but they had influenced its direction, ensuring that human judgment would remain central to the application of military force, particularly in decisions involving lethal consequences. In a world increasingly shaped by algorithms and artificial intelligence, they had demonstrated the enduring value of human qualities that no machine could fully replicate: intuition, ethical reasoning, adaptability, and the ability to make wise judgments in ambiguous circumstances. As Harrison looked toward the distant lights of Fort Hood, he felt a deep satisfaction in that achievement. Warfare would continue to evolve technologically, becoming ever more sophisticated and capable. But thanks in part to what they had demonstrated, it would remain anchored in human judgment and human values, a steel legacy that would endure through whatever technological revolutions lay ahead.